In a small town, people were busy trading and living peacefully. While the streets were bustling, the protagonist had his own way of traveling. Others walked on the ground, but he flew across rooftops. He almost stepped on a sleeping cat, so he turned back to apologize to it. The protagonist ran into a sandwich shop, tossed 3 coins to buy food, then climbed back onto the roof and continued on his way, munching on the sandwich to ease his hunger. Suddenly, he stopped on some random rooftop, remembering he had an appointment with someone named Tommy. Seth quickly ran to the meeting spot and performed a few flips to show off to his friend. Seth asked if the boy had been waiting long. Seth had promised to show Tommy magic but arrived late. As compensation, Seth brought some thick books he had stolen from Anma, which Tommy immediately noticed, causing the protagonist to break into a sweat, promising to return them before she discovered they were missing. Seth began flipping through the book admiringly, then extended his hand to cast a spell. When no magic appeared, he became momentarily confused, then quickly flipped back through the book to hide his embarrassment. With no other option, Seth tried to create his own magic, but only embarrassed himself further. Angry, Seth threw the book aside and created a different spell. This time, he succeeded in creating a beam of light that drew energy toward him. Then he punched a huge rock in front of him. Tommy excitedly praised him, finally allowing the protagonist to redeem his earlier embarrassment. However, disaster struck when the rock he punched fell straight into a cow pen, forcing both of them to flee in distress. Meanwhile, Anma was trying to buy rope, but the shop owner claimed they were out of stock. She replied that she had seen some in the storeroom and asked if he had a problem with her. The owner, terrified, cowered behind an employee, trembling. He knew she was a sorceress, and he didn't sell to sorcerers. Anma defended herself like a proper lawyer, sweetly promising to help his shop flourish. Frightened, he immediately ran to get the rope. Anma went outside because of the noise and saw Seth running desperately toward her with a herd of cows chasing him from behind. Recognizing the protagonist, Anma's face contorted with anger, and the townspeople were furious with this troublemaking protagonist. Seth worried that if Anma found out, he'd be in big trouble, but 2 seconds later, he ran right past her. Seth could only gape in fear. Anma pulled out her spear, channeled magical energy into it, and with one swing sent the herd of cows, along with Seth and Tommy, flying into the sky. The cows landed safely and arranged themselves into a wall, while the protagonist landed face first into the ground, with Tommy falling on top of him. Anma said she would punish this village-wrecking kid, but as she spoke, a rock flew straight into her head. The villagers angrily berated them, even criticizing Tommy by association. Anma turned around, swung her spear, and a whirlwind appeared. 2 people rode brooms and flew away. Seth was forced by Anma to clean the walls, grumbling as he worked. His grandmother had forbidden him from going to that island until she forgave him, and the issue of the stolen magic books came to light. Seth couldn't understand why such a respected sorceress was being mistreated. Anma explained that people viewed sorcerers as no different from nemesis creatures that brought disaster. She again warned Seth that his head was full of nonsense and told him to focus on cleaning. Then a tremor made Anma uncomfortable. The protagonist was suspended in mid-air, begging her to pull him up because he needed to use the bathroom. But punishment was punishment, and Anma wouldn't let him up, resulting in desperate cries. Seth sat in his room, flipping through pages about nemesis creatures, thinking that if these monsters were completely eliminated, sorcerers wouldn't have to fight anymore. Filled with energy, the protagonist stood up and declared he would become the most powerful sorcerer. The next day, Seth dragged Tommy along to practice magic, but accidentally set his hand on fire and had to quickly extinguish the flames. Tommy advised Seth to stop, but the protagonist wouldn't agree. Tommy mentioned his mother had instructed him not to play with sorcerers, while Seth was still holding his hand, blowing on it as smoke continued to rise. Seth said people just hadn't seen how wonderful sorcerers could be. His close friend Tommy concluded from Seth's magic learning attempts that it was safer to use normal tools. The protagonist had one aspiration: to become a nemesis hunter, eliminating all nemesis creatures to bring peace to the world, just like Anma. Tommy was looking at something flying in the sky and wasn't paying attention to what the protagonist was saying. A sphere that looked like an egg was hurtling toward the village at dizzying speed. It was a nemesis egg. Tommy suggested they should notify Anma immediately, but Seth said she was already hunting nemesis on another island, so he told Tommy to evacuate everyone while he stayed to fight it. Seth returned to his house, a hot air balloon floating in the sky using 2 small propellers. He gathered weapons and equipped himself, ready to destroy the nemesis. Carrying too much weight, the small propellers couldn't handle it, and naturally, he fell freely to the ground. Tommy ran to inform the villagers, but they were too busy gossiping to listen or leave. A loud explosion followed, which they thought was the monster, but it was actually the protagonist. Thanks to Seth, the egg hatched prematurely. People scattered in panic as the massive nemesis appeared. Seth threw an explosive at the monster's face, creating a cloud of smoke, but it didn't faze the creature at all as it looked up at the protagonist. He continued to attack with a magic sword, but surprisingly, the sword broke. The protagonist's attacks were nothing more than an H to the monster, which angrily kicked Seth, sending him flying into a dwarf's shop. Tommy, concerned for his brave friend, ran over but froze in front of the monster. The monster swung a powerful punch toward Tommy, but Seth shielded the boy with his body, telling Tommy to run quickly. Fighting the nemesis alone was impossible. Suddenly, a beam of energy from the sky struck the monster. An old man and a group of sorcerers had arrived to help Seth. Seth was saved by a group of mysterious sorcerers. Surprisingly, they defeated the nemesis with just one move. Before they could even finish introducing themselves, the monster suddenly came back to life. The old man called for his disciples to concentrate their power and attack the nemesis. A beam of light surrounded the monster and immediately bound it tightly. The old sorcerer and his 2 disciples jumped down, and Seth asked who he was. He said he was a nemesis hunter and told the protagonist to call his group the Bravery Hunters. The team lacked coordination in their introduction. 3 people were in sync, but one member named Jita turned in the opposite direction. The annoyed old man grabbed his collar and scolded him. The villagers watched this internal squabble with weariness. Then the sorcerer announced to the villagers that they had come to destroy the nemesis and save the people from the monsters. The sorcerer, named John Bosman, told the villagers that if they wanted to live, they just needed to follow his group's instruction. Seth was surprised because, apart from Anma, he had never met other sorcerers, so he asked to join them in battle. Seth begged the old man to let him fight alongside them, as he was also a sorcerer with a burning desire to become great. John Bosman pointed at the protagonist, saying he was impressed by his courage to face the nemesis alone. He quickly accepted Seth as a teammate, but the villagers disagreed because the protagonist had repeatedly caused damage. They even tried to drive Seth away, but John Bosman defended him. He removed his hat, revealing a remarkably stylish head, and confidently said he had faith in Seth, then urged them to move on because the barrier was about to fail at containing the nemesis. He told everyone to leave immediately. The villagers worried about family members still at home. John said he would evacuate everyone, but they needed someone as bait, so Seth was assigned to distract the nemesis. The protagonist, overflowing with confidence, said he could still eliminate the monster. Although the old man was skeptical, he encouraged him to try. As the evacuation proceeded, the protagonist stayed behind to face the monster. The time barrier holding the monster had only 2 bars left. Seth began to think that using items was useless, so this time he would use magic directly. As soon as the barrier broke, Seth flew over and punched the monster in the stomach. The nemesis's stomach acted like a spring, propelling the protagonist away. The protagonist had underestimated it and was now being chased, running for his life, berating himself for having to flee constantly. The fat nemesis moved at an extremely fast pace, not inferior to Seth's speed. The protagonist tried to run erratically, then took the opportunity to kick the monster's head, causing it to dent. The protagonist laughed in delight, but the nemesis, like an elastic mattress, looked at him and raised its hand to flatten Seth. The protagonist switched tactics from direct attacks to guerrilla warfare, but that was also ineffective. Seth flew into a rooftop, remembering old John's words that to survive, one must think. Before the protagonist could formulate a plan, the scene shifted to Tommy, who had gone to meet his father at the bank to inform him about the evacuation. John's group arrived at the bank looking like robbers. Seth found a chain and lured the nemesis to chase him toward it. When the monster arrived, Seth pulled the chain, causing it to trip, then wound the chain around it like tying up a pig, laughing in triumph at having captured the nemesis. It rotated its face and fired energy from the hole in its head. Anma was flying around on her broom because the villagers on another island had called her over after mistaking some cows for nemesis creatures. Suddenly feeling uneasy, Anma sped up, silently hoping nothing had happened to Seth. The destructive nemesis fired a shot that pierced a long section, while the protagonist narrowly escaped after the recent blast. He sat panting in a nook. The old man John was truly robbing the bank. It was no longer just a suspicion. He had everyone in the bank tied up, and his disciples each carried a large bag of money, all laughing with glee. Seth entered and witnessed the blatant bank robbery. The old man even thanked the boy for his help. The villagers, who were tied up, accused the protagonist of being John's accomplice, creating a whole scenario where Seth and his grandmother had befriended Tommy to lead their accomplices to the village bank to steal money. John revealed his true face. The robbers had used the nemesis as an opportunity to steal money, and Seth was too trusting, so the old man took advantage of him. The sorcerer harbored resentment because whenever anything happened, the villagers blamed it on sorcerers. They only pleaded for help when nemesis creatures appeared. The bound villagers continued to curse them. John said Seth had fought until he was wounded all over. Yet they still insulted him without a single word of thanks. He pressed close to Seth, saying they would never accept him. And in the villagers' view, they were no different from nemesis creatures. He told the protagonist he could be a hero, but would still be rejected in the end. Seth struggled internally, clenching his fist while the old man made a hateful face, saying that because of these situations, they could get rich. One of John's disciples interrupted, urging him to leave, and the old man sensibly gave Seth a bag of money. Seth punched John in the face, sending him flying into the wall, to everyone's surprise. Seeing their boss attacked, the disciples rushed in, but were knocked out by the protagonist. Seth still adhered to his ideals, whether the people acknowledged him or not. He rushed to attack the most foolish-looking one in the group, but was surprised when the man used powerful magic to easily blow Seth away. John's underlings wanted to finish Seth off, but the old man stopped them, saying to let the protagonist understand that everything he had said was true. Seth was severely injured and couldn't get up, so John left him for the nemesis to deal with. It broke free from its restraints, and the robbery gang departed, leaving the tied-up villagers with the barely conscious Seth. In this life-or-death situation, as the nemesis prepared to fire another blast to finish them all, the protagonist staggered to his feet, still wearing a confident smile as he looked at his friend. The energy ball grew larger and larger, but Seth neither fled nor avoided it. He recalled John's words that they were the same kind, both despised and hated by villagers, but with unwavering faith, he still wanted to prove himself an excellent sorcerer who would protect everyone from nemesis creatures. As the monster attacked, the sorcerers stood by, witnessing its terrifying power. Just as John was about to turn away, his underling called him back. He saw Seth stopping the powerful beam with his bare hands. John was stunned, unable to believe the protagonist still had strength to use power. In the end, what was Seth? Seth exerted all his power to attack the nemesis, creating a huge hole in its stomach. John was surprised that the protagonist had defeated the monster alone, and with his bare hands. After destroying the monster, Seth collapsed exhaustedly, breathing heavily. Just when they thought it was over, the monster unexpectedly rose again. But the protagonist had no strength left. Fortunately, fireballs appeared from the sky and struck the nemesis. Anma had arrived just in time to finish off the monster. Seth, exhausted, fainted and was caught by Anma, who told him to rest. When Seth regained consciousness, he found himself back in his room with bandages all over his body. He didn't care about his own wounds but asked about the villagers and the monster. Anma said the nemesis had been destroyed and the bravery hunters had been captured. She scolded the protagonist for using Fantasia with his bare hands, saying normal sorcerers couldn't do that. Seth wasn't concerned about such details. He only cared that the monster was defeated. She mentioned that the court hated abnormal people, especially those connected to magic, so the villagers might have reported them to the court. Seth still believed they wouldn't do that because he had saved them from the nemesis. She recalled that after Seth fainted, the robbers were captured because of John's loud mouth, and Anma had turned the whole group into a stack of paper with a single snap. Tommy found a piece of Seth's torn cloth from his battle with the nemesis and brought it to Anma. She took it and asked the boy if he had picked it up. Tommy nodded and thanked Seth for saving them. Anma herself told the protagonist that humans and sorcerers couldn't coexist harmoniously. Seth, still clinging to his ideal of eliminating all nemesis creatures so that no one would be infected anymore, believed humans would no longer fear sorcerers. Anma was exasperated by the protagonist's naive thinking, asking if he knew how many nemesis creatures existed in the world. Seth confidently answered that they just needed to find and kill the leader. Anma sighed at this thought and asked if Seth wanted to go to Radiant, the rumored home of the nemesis ancestors. So the protagonist set a new goal, to find Radiant and destroy it. The two ended up arguing while the two bats watched, bored and yawning. The protagonist still couldn't accept the truth that no matter how much they protected the villagers from nemesis creatures, they would still view sorcerers as villains. Anma said she wouldn't let Seth become a villain, but with his sense of justice, he didn't want Anma and other righteous sorcerers to be seen as villains either. Anma handed Seth a cup of medicine, telling him to drink it and rest. At night, as she prepared to sleep, she recalled memories from long ago. When she woke up, she found herself in a hospital where a bald doctor told her she had been unconscious after being seriously injured. But Anma said she had no recollection of it. The doctor turned to the unconscious protagonist beside her, saying she had held him so tightly that the doctor thought he was Anma's son. She had lost everything, including her memory, with only Seth by her side. The journey to recover her own memories officially began. After recovering from her injuries, Anma took Seth with her, traveling everywhere to find people who might know about her and Seth's identity. But no one knew or cared. She took Seth into the forest, where a tremor echoed in Anma's mind. She was a survivor of a nemesis encounter. Because of this, she had been cursed and gained the ability to use Fantasia. The protagonist was nothing but a burden to Anma, but she kept him because he was the only clue to finding her true self. On a fateful day, while Anma was hunting Nemesis, the protagonist was building a snowman when village children came to cause trouble, throwing stones at his head and beating him without reason. The kids blamed Seth for the deaths of the village's livestock and took turns kicking the protagonist. Angry, Seth unleashed a sorcerer's power, completely destroying the house where they were staying. The villagers tied up the protagonist and threatened to burn him alive to prevent him from harming others. The torches were extinguished as Anma grabbed a man's face, threatening that he too had been cursed, causing the villagers to scatter in fear. She took Seth away to find a place that could protect him from those foolish humans. Anma's current mission was to protect Seth, and the hot air balloon house floating in the sky was born. They continued like this, moving from one place to another. Anma stood up and went to the old drawer, opening it to take out Seth's childhood clothes. The next morning, Seth had recovered and was peering around to see where Anma was, looking for a chance to escape. Unexpectedly, when he went outside, she was already waiting for him, freezing the protagonist in his tracks. Anma had raised Seth since he was little, so she understood what he was thinking. Seth very much wanted to find the place called Radiant. He thought she would stop him, but Anma asked how he planned to find it without any clues. Seth was speechless, but with his supreme confidence and superior intellect, he believed faith alone would lead him to find it. Anma was at a loss for words with the protagonist and handed him her broom. Knowing she couldn't stop Seth, she went along with it. The broom was a parting gift. Anma said if he was going to pretend to be a sorcerer, a magic broom was essential. She also gave Seth a pair of gloves, making him promise not to become a monster. Seth affirmed he wouldn't become a monster. He would be the greatest sorcerer in the world. The protagonist accepted the broom and gloves, said goodbye to Anma, and ran off. But after a few steps, he stopped, turned back, and hugged her. Anma comforted the protagonist, who forced himself to smile at her before jumping on the broom and flying away. Anma had been holding back her emotions, but once the protagonist left, tears streamed down her face. Seth, flying in the air, couldn't stop wiping away his tears as he looked down at Tommy. He saw the protagonist waving goodbye, then turned forward, determined to find Radiant and destroy it. The Nemesis hunters were having a meeting. Major Vones remarked that their recent hunt had yielded good results. Captain Lott, who disliked Vones, sarcastically said he'd rather hear rats causing trouble than listen to Vones' nonsense. Colonel Santori, with his bushy beard, was sleeping soundly, while Major Mina said they were role models for the people and should maintain a proper image. While they were arguing merrily, she told them to calm down and listen to the teachings of the scripture. But Santori continued to sleep and snore loudly. General Thor entered. He had summoned them because a horned sorcerer had been spotted on the outskirts of Pompo Hills. After Seth left, a pink hot air balloon appeared in the sky. Anma had asked for help from Mr. Duke, a Nemesis researcher. He even showed his research certificate to prove his credibility. A large warship floated in the air. They had captured a sorcerer. A subordinate asked Captain Dragon what to do with the captured sorcerer. The captain replied there was no choice but to bring her along until they completed their mission. Mr. Duke complained that the island was in the middle of nowhere and very difficult to find. Anma gave him a 1-star rating because she had called him 3 days ago and he only showed up now. The bearded man explained he had sent his assistant ahead, then muttered to himself that the girl must have gotten lost. He had arrived 3 days late and was already asking for payment, hence the 1-star rating. Anma negotiated the amount to be paid to him when he brought the rest of the Nemesis. Duke, talking to himself again, knew he couldn't deceive her, so he climbed onto his ship and left, saying they needed to quickly get the remaining parts before the court arrived. The cute pink pig ship flew away, and Anma sighed, hoping Seth was still okay. Speaking of the protagonist, the scene shifted to Seth, who had just punched a soldier on the warship with his bare hands. He was surrounded by soldiers holding shields. Seth didn't understand why he was being held on this ship. Captain Dragon, hearing the commotion, came to see and found that Seth had flown directly into the warship and been captured. The protagonist was firmly held by a group of shouting soldiers. The captain's attention was drawn to Seth's tiny horns. With no other option, the protagonist used his power to throw the soldiers away. The protagonist confidently introduced himself as a sorcerer. Dragon asked if Seth was stupid. The man told Seth that he had used magic in front of them, so they had to detain him. Before Seth could explain further, the other soldiers rushed in to capture him. A chaotic fight broke out on the airship, and naturally, the protagonist was thrown into an iron cage. He looked around and saw a soldier holding his bag, so he reached out to demand it back. He wanted to test whether his hand or the iron cage was harder, so he punched the cage directly. As a result, his hand swelled up. Seth held his hand and felt strange because he couldn't use Fantasia. Captain Dragon explained to Min that this was a black-silver cage that neutralized Sorcerer's Fantasia. Seth asked the captain what they planned to do with him. Of course, they would imprison him for as long as 10 years. Seth said if he was imprisoned that long, he wouldn't be able to find Radiant. The guard didn't understand, so Dragon explained that it was a mythical land rumored by sorcerers, the birthplace of nemesis monsters. Everyone was skeptical, but the protagonist was certain it existed and clearly stated he would go there to destroy those monsters. The captain kindly reminded Seth not to use forbidden words to avoid increasing his punishment. The soldier holding Seth's bag asked Dragon if all sorcerers were cursed and if that was why they were dealt with. He didn't listen to Seth's explanation and walked away directly. A hook grabbed the cage, the door opened, and the cage holding the protagonist slowly descended. Seth now remembered Anma's instruction to hide his horns. Anma had asked the protagonist where he was planning to go, and Seth pointed to the sky saying up, then realized that was wrong and said down. She was exasperated that he didn't even know his destination. Anma then directed him to go to Actimus City. Seth hadn't realized this and asked why he needed to go there. She became frustrated, asking how he expected to reach Radiant without any clues. Seth asked if going there would provide information, and Anma said it wasn't certain, but the chances of finding information were higher than elsewhere. She said Actimus City was a research city for sorcerers. She carefully instructed him to go there and find someone named Yaga, one of the strongest sorcerers, and reminded him to stay away from yellow cats. As Seth was recalling Anma's instructions, a small bright green bat flew in front of him, startling the protagonist. After frightening Seth, the bat dove into the hair of a girl who was also locked in a cage. The bushy-haired girl stretched, having had a good sleep. The two began to get acquainted, and the girl introduced herself as Melly. She was on her way to Pompo Hills Island 21, but somehow ended up in the court's cage. She said she was there to collect Nemesis. She was a sorceress from Actimus, exactly where Seth wanted to go. The bright green bat from earlier was named Barry, and there was a very friendly greeting between Barry and Seth. The bright green bat flew over, flapping enthusiastically. Melly said she had been separated from Mr. Duke and just needed to wait for him to rescue her. After talking for a while, Melly finally noticed the tiny pair of horns on Seth's head. So Melly became curious and asked Seth if magic was shot from those horns. The protagonist answered no, and she lost interest, which annoyed Seth, along with the face of that Barry. The two were chatting happily when a loud crash sounded. Mr. Duke's little pink pig boat had hooked onto the court's warship. He showed his Nemesis research ID to the soldiers. It was unexpected that the court had captured 3 sorcerers who had walked right into their hands without the trouble of having to capture them. Melly saw Mr. Duke and said he had come to rescue her. Melly said she was collecting Nemesis when she was captured. One side denied ever meeting her, while the other claimed they knew each other. The result was that he too was captured. Thanks to Melly's enthusiasm, the researcher ended up in the same cage with the two of them. He was pulling his hair and shouting loudly when Seth boasted that he was the one who had defeated that nemesis. Seth asked him why he didn't hunt them himself. No one was foolish enough to risk their lives like the protagonist. Seth still maintained his belief that he would destroy Radiant, even though he knew nothing about it. Now Barry proved somewhat useful, stealing a key and bringing it to the 3 of them. Successfully escaping the cage, 2 were happy while 1 was dejected. The 3 began sneaking around to escape from the court. Escaping was already difficult, but Seth also demanded to find his belongings, so the group of 3, not unlike a circus, split up to find Seth's bag. In the end, they were all discovered by Dragon and surrounded once again. The protagonist took action to hold off the soldiers so they could retrieve his belongings for him. But his power was so great that it sent the other 2 flying straight to the pile of equipment. The archers followed orders and shot arrows. Melly used a defensive spell in time to protect Seth. Melly's personality changed 180 degrees when under extreme stress, her battle spirit increasing to maximum level, and with one shot, she blew away the deputy captain and his soldiers. Finally, the 3 successfully escaped from the court and returned to Actimus. The cute little pink pig ship also returned to Actimus. Seth looked around with interest. Everything was new to him. The ship passed through a magic circle designed to scan for prohibited items. Seth was dazzled by the sorcerer's ships in this place, and the pink pig ship returned to its private dock. Melly acted as a tour guide for Seth, telling him that to enter Actimus, they had to pass through this security area. At the ticket inspector, he asked if Seth was accompanying anyone in Actimus. Seth cheerfully replied that he was with Duke, whose face immediately darkened. The ticket inspector then asked if he wanted to become a citizen. With his superior level of understanding, Seth needed Melly to explain. She said that to work as a hunter or enjoy the city's benefits, one needed to become a citizen. When Duke heard about residency, he urged Seth to do it because Yaga wouldn't want to meet him if he wasn't a resident. So without giving Seth a chance to choose, he directly dragged him off to register for citizenship. Seth felt excited, as if he had reached heaven. Duke reminded him that they were about to be late for the induction ceremony. The protagonist pulled Duke's hand and ran like the wind to the ceremony. The three arrived just as the ceremony was beginning. The protagonist remembered Anma's instruction to avoid the yellow cat, and now he was facing a yellow cat standing on the stage. The yellow cat majesty's ideal was to remove the curse that caused sorcerers to suffer. The cat gave each newcomer a contract. They just needed to sign it to become members of the country. This majesty cat was truly deceiving people, luring naive newcomers like the protagonist to sign debt notes, and to repay the debt, they had to become hunters, capturing nemesis creatures to pay it off. Duke was pleased to have enticed Seth into this, but his happiness didn't last 5 minutes when he received news that Seth had run away. As his guardian, Duke was also responsible for the protagonist's debt. Duke alone carried 2 life debts. Seth patted his shoulder, saying that after finding Yaga and learning where Radiant was, he would leave. In plain terms, the protagonist left the debt to him and fled. Thus began the needle in a haystack search for Yaga, someone whose appearance Seth didn't even know. Before Duke could warn them, Seth and Melly were standing between 2 paths. Naturally, looking at 2 bridges, one dilapidated and one golden, the protagonist chose the golden one. As a result, Duke, who was already poor, became even poorer. In this world where touching anything cost money, combined with the protagonist and Melly's intelligence, Duke's debts piled up even more. The 3 entered a tavern to inquire, and as part of the proletariat class, Duke reminded them to just ask questions without ordering anything. But as soon as the staff arrived and asked if they wanted anything, Seth quickly replied, "Milk." Because of Seth's slip, Duke grabbed his collar and shook him, while Melly ignored the 2 and went to ask a drunk man for information, only to be sent away. Unfortunately, she accidentally triggered her second personality, and the man was in trouble. Before Duke could stop her, Melly had blown up the entire tavern, multiplying the debt exponentially. Duke was depressed about these 2 troublemakers, making him even more indebted. People passing by laughed at them, dubbing them the debt kings of the month. Duke was thoroughly depressed by the debt these 2 had caused, while Seth and Melly remained carefree. Seth felt that people here were much happier compared to where he had lived before. A cauldron appeared somewhere, emitting a voice, and the 2 fools agreed that the cauldron could speak. A blue-haired dwarf emerged from the cauldron. Seth and Melly asked who he was, but he asked back if they were looking for Yaga. Seth immediately stood up and asked if he knew him, to which the blue-haired man told the protagonist to answer his question first. What did he think of the city created by the Yellow Cat Majesty? Seth shared that the cat was a scoundrel, but this city didn't discriminate against sorcerers. They could freely use magic without prejudice. Although everything cost money, people were happy. The blue-haired man asked Seth if he knew why the cat needed so much money. Melly also stood up, saying it was because he needed money to find a way to break the curse, but she only knew part of it. Majesty needed a lot of money also to search for Yaga. The court's ship had also arrived, and the court soldiers prepared to attack and capture Seth, Melly, and Duke. Groups of sorcerers flew out to face them. A soldier reported to the deputy that they had received orders from headquarters to abort the mission and withdraw immediately. He didn't believe it and asked why they had to withdraw. Captain Dragon came out, saying that not only the court had influence over the nation of Actimus, but also the faction of the Yellow Cat Majesty. The captain was indeed knowledgeable. The country also had members of the 13 Covenant sorcerers, and just one of them could match this entire warship. They had both power and political authority. Directly confronting them would be like confronting the entire nation. After explaining this to his deputy, he ordered a retreat. The Cat Majesty lay sprawled on a large cushion, satisfied to see the court forces retreat without accomplishing anything. The blue-haired man had shown them the power that Majesty had built to shelter unfortunate sorcerers. The blue-haired man asked the protagonist what he planned to do when he met Yaga. Seth said he would ask about Radiant and destroy that place. The man considered this a far-fetched idea and suggested that instead of searching for a place that only existed in rumors and might not be real, it would be better to protect this land of Actimus. Seth remained unwavering in his determination to find Radiant. His mission was to protect all people in the world, not just sorcerers. The blue-haired man sighed at his stubbornness, which was exactly like Anma's, then jumped up to stand on the cauldron. Only then did he reveal his identity to the protagonist. He was Yaga. All 3 were astonished, not expecting to meet Yaga so easily. Dragon returned to report to the red-haired man, who was quite surprised that someone had escaped the captain's sight. He had already prepared himself for punishment, but the red-haired man didn't pursue it, only asking if Dragon was certain that the sorcerer with tiny horns on his head used magic with his hands. The captain was absolutely certain because he had seen with his own eyes Seth blowing away his soldiers with bare hands. So the red-haired man told Dragon to monitor the situation in Actimus, report back if he saw the protagonist, and not to disclose this secret. Dragon received the order and left. Shortly after he departed, some random person flew down. He had heard the entire conversation and was interested in Seth. The red-haired man said that sorcerers who could use Fantasia with their bare hands were very dangerous, so they must capture Seth at all costs. A beautiful morning for Melly. Just as she finished praising what a beautiful day it was, a loud sound echoed from afar. Seth appeared from somewhere, surprising her as he ran straight to embrace Melly, begging her to teach him magic. The reason Seth wanted to become her disciple was because earlier, he had met that mysterious blue-haired old man. Although he had explained that he was Anna's student, the old man didn't care about that. He only wanted to see someone with real power. Only then would they be worthy of his guidance. Hearing this, Seth became angry and demonstrated what he considered his strongest technique. At this point, Seth looked very proud and was waiting for the old man's praise. But what he was waiting for was the old man's broom hitting him on the head. He angrily said that what Seth was doing was merely concentrating Fantasia and applying it to the tree trunk, not even considered magic. If he didn't even know the simplest magic, how could the old man guide him to Radiant? Back to the present, that was why Seth rushed to ask Melly to teach him magic, specifically the terrifying technique she used when they first met. Melly was happy about this, but unfortunately, she couldn't guide Seth because she could only perform that technique when her personality changed, becoming aggressive enough to use that attack magic. Normally, she only specialized in defensive magic. Hearing this, Seth was very disappointed but quickly regained his spirit. If she couldn't teach him magic, perhaps she could teach him how to use Fantasia. Hearing this, Melly was very enthusiastic to teach, saying he just needed to apply the formula. Seth's face must have frozen. Even Barry looked at Melly with judgmental eyes, causing her to fearfully cry and apologize to Seth for not being able to help. Hearing this, Seth wasn't bothered and said he would find a way himself. But Melly quickly made amends by leading Seth to find another teacher. In the distance was Mr. Duke, who was nervously rehearsing romantic declarations with a rose in his hand. Seeing the two approaching, he jumped in surprise and instinctively knelt, pointing the flower toward Melly as if to give it to her. Melly complimented the beautiful flower and was about to accept it when he said it wasn't for her. At that moment, Melba appeared behind Melly and greeted everyone, causing Duke to blush with embarrassment. Melba warmly greeted Melly's group, hoping they could visit her cafe. Seeing Melba's cheerful face as she chatted with everyone, Duke gazed at her lovingly and silently admired her. She was truly beautiful, with a sweet voice and chocolate-colored eyes. Suddenly, bang! The cat in Melba's arms hit Duke on the head with a tray, making him lose his wits. Papa warned him about staring at his daughter with those eyes. After speaking, he threw the bouquet straight into the air. Unable to accept this, Duke and Papa fiercely fought each other. In the end, both were exhausted, lying face down and breathing heavily. Papa couldn't accept any bug appearing around his daughter. Hearing this made Duke burst into tears because the man didn't even consider him human anymore. Melba apologized to him, but Melly told her not to worry as he was used to it. Seeing this, Melba invited them for a meal as an apology. Barry also happily ate until his stomach was full. Melba asked Seth about his purpose for coming here. Hearing this, Seth replied that he wanted to find Radiant and destroy it. Uncle Duke beside him pouted and sarcastically whispered that searching for such mysterious places was typical childish thinking. But as soon as he finished speaking, Melba excitedly praised Seth for his determination, making Duke furious as he turned and bit the back of his chair. Melly innocently asked if Duke found the chair tastier than the food. Seth continued his conversation with Melba, saying he wanted to learn more magic to become stronger. Then he could find and destroy Radiant. Though it might be difficult, he would do his best, which was why he had asked Uncle Duke to be his instructor. Hearing himself mentioned, Duke became increasingly angry. He couldn't believe these kids would ask for his help after causing him so much trouble. He had lost so much money that he couldn't sleep at night. How could he accept such a person as his disciple? Before he could finish, Melba exclaimed, "That's wonderful," and looked at Duke with sparkling, admiring eyes, praising him for being such a good person, willing to help Seth so he could embark on his mission to save humanity. Duke, being a gentleman, was of course delighted and quickly changed his attitude, expressing that his academy would always welcome Seth. After speaking, he smiled at Melba with a handsome expression, saying that once he taught him, attack magic would be as easy as frying an egg. Melba eagerly invited the youngsters to try her herbal tea. The rainbow tea looked very appealing, but Seth took one sip and spat it out like a dragon. Melly gently complimented its distinctive flavor. As for Uncle Duck, he took one sip, and though he appeared calm on the outside, inside, his soul's tears screamed that his tongue wanted to detach. But despite thinking this, his words were still complimentary, so Melba gave him several more cups. He couldn't bear it anymore and could only escape with the excuse that Seth was eager to learn martial arts soon. With that, he grabbed Seth by the neck and disappeared in a flash. When they reached the riverbank, Uncle Duck was still regretting why he had agreed to help these unlikable kids. But he clarified that he would only teach theory, not practice or how to use Fantasia. Seth was still very happy to accept. At this point, Duck took a book from his pocket, read it to Seth, and instructed him to follow along. Breathe in, breathe out as if pushing all impurities out of the body. Then feel the Fantasia flowing. Continue to concentrate on visualizing the desired magic shape, and then call its name. But the result was that Seth failed. He couldn't do it, which made him angry. Seeing this, Uncle Duck reminded him that spirit alone wasn't enough. Hearing this, Seth showed the pot-bellied Uncle Duck what the protagonist's aura was like. Seth concentrated his strength. The Fantasia light streams gathered at his fist, and then he delivered a powerful punch. Amid the dust clouds, Uncle Duck was sent flying to the blue sky. After landing, Uncle Duck was bandaged all over his face. Although Seth had apologized, he was still angry and unforgiving. But if he didn't teach him anymore, there would be no one else to teach Seth magic. Melly was constantly worried but accidentally transformed, standing up and aggressively beating both Seth and Uncle Duck. Two brightly colored birds saw this and fled in fear. Only Uncle Duck continued to fly high into the sky as he tried to protect his love. Melly chased after and continuously attacked Seth, but he only ran away without retaliating, making her angrier and more violent in her attacks. But then a wall above Melly collapsed. Seth, in order to save her, burst forth using attack magic correctly. Thanks to this, he saved Melly and helped her return to normal. But then they remembered Uncle Duck, who had disappeared. He was stuck on top of a tree, desperately calling for help. Seth demonstrated his excellent skill for the blue-haired old man to see. Though he criticized it, the boy didn't do too badly. It's just that with this level of power, he still didn't meet the conditions to reach the forbidden land of Radiant. Seth's desperate scream echoed through the air. He was running and screaming when faced with the attacks of the blue-haired old man. The old man continued to attack. He delivered a sky-shattering blow that made the boy lie flat on the ground. Seeing this, the blue-haired old man lamented that it would surely take a lot of time. On a fresh, cool morning, Uncle Duck was savoring an excellent cup of coffee while admiring the beauty of his poetic muse, Melba, a beautiful young lady with brown hair and bright lips. But this scene only lasted for a split second before being ruined by the kids, Seth and Melly. He was very annoyed that his perfect day was being spoiled by these youngsters. Uncle Duck was so angry that he didn't even want to eat. But Melba spoke up to let him know that she had just brewed a coffee with an exquisite taste and asked if he wanted to try it. When Duck heard it was made by Melba herself, he became very tense, knowing for certain that its taste would be horrific. But in his heart, Uncle Duck thought that if this could create a good impression with Melba, he would be willing to swallow it no matter how difficult. Looking at the tense faces of Seth and the others, then at the expectant expressions of Melba and her papa, the uncle anxiously took the cup of coffee and tried a little in front of everyone. But unexpectedly, this recipe of Melba's was incredibly delicious. Seeing Duck's expression, both Melly and Seth were very surprised. Uncle Duck took the coffee cup and went outside to enjoy it. He thought this was a good sign that he and Melba would surely have good news in the future. But unexpectedly, from the sewer, a huge octopus appeared, climbed up, and dragged Uncle Duck down into the sewer, shocking everyone. They wondered if it was a nemesis. It wasn't a nemesis, confirmed the blue-haired old man, Yaga. His sudden appearance startled everyone. He mocked Seth, saying he couldn't even distinguish a nemesis yet wanted to kill them. Then he ducked into his jar and pulled out an encyclopedia. It contained information about the monster from earlier. It was a hybrid between squid and octopus, called a devilfish dragon. This was a creature that lived in the sewers, where Actimus's experimental animals were discarded. Seth was afraid that Uncle Duck might be eaten by the monster. Yaga calmly said no, it never ate meat. It only liked coffee. That was why it appeared under this coffee shop. While everyone was sighing with relief that this would be safe for Uncle Duck, Melba spoke up and told everyone that Duck drank a lot of coffee, and moreover, his entire body always smelled of coffee. This frightened the old man Yaga. If that was true, the monster might eat Duck. Hearing this, Seth and Melly screamed in terror down into the sewer. Down there, Uncle Duck, after lying motionless, also woke up. The coffee cup in his hand was still intact. The monster was gently enjoying the rich flavored coffee. But with its huge body, a tiny cup like this couldn't satisfy it. So it turned to Uncle Duck, who was quietly trying to slip away, grabbed him, and prepared to enjoy him. Uncle Duck screamed in fear for help. But suddenly, in this critical moment, a strong aroma appeared from somewhere. This smell attracted the octopus, which quickly took Duck along as it pursued the scent. Meanwhile, Seth and Melly were carrying a super-sized bucket of coffee that had been brewed by Melba herself. This strong flavor would surely attract the coffee-loving monster. Melly asked Seth if he was afraid to fight the giant beast without the help of the blue-haired old man. Thinking back, since the old man had said this was a lesson for Seth, he wasn't afraid and didn't worry about fighting to the end. He would prove to that antiquated old man what he was capable of. Seeing this, Melly also promised to support him. Right after, the monster emerged from the sewer water. Next to it, Uncle Duck was hanging upside down, vomiting a stomach full of sewer water. Seth asked if Uncle Duck was okay. He angrily replied, "Look, do I seem okay?" Melly beside him also shouted with joy because the uncle was fine and hadn't been eaten by the octopus yet. Seth quickly threw a powerful punch at the many-legged monster, but it backfired. This monster was elastic, so Seth was repelled and sent flying in all directions. Seeing this, Uncle Duck angrily shouted, "What kind of delicate maiden's attack is that? The monster isn't even scratched." While Seth was helpless because he couldn't directly attack the beast, it had already approached and seen the enormous bucket of coffee behind the two. Though they tried to stop it, Seth and Melly could only helplessly watch as it drank the entire bucket of coffee. But very quickly afterward, the many-legged beast promptly spat everything out of its mouth, causing Seth and Melly to bump heads. The two, blackened, fainted immediately. Only Uncle Duck's desperate cries for help remained in the sewer. Meanwhile, on the airship, two men were discussing the appearance of the horned sorcerer. The one with an eye patch sitting on the chair mused, could he really be that strong? This made him feel extremely interested. Back to Seth and Melly, who had returned to the coffee shop. They were bathing, washing, and angrily cursing the beast. But ultimately, their affection for Uncle Duck was paramount, so they still had to do their best to rescue him from the monster. This time, they prepared more carefully. With sharp traps placed around the coffee bucket, they could catch the beast. But as a result, all the traps ended up on Uncle Duck. While the octopus wasn't caught in any, they decided to try another approach. This time, Melly cleverly brought a fishing net. She thought it would be useful because, after all, the monster was a seafood creature. As expected, the monster drank all the coffee, got excited, put Uncle Duck in the net, and spun him around. Determined to get revenge, this time Melly brought a crossbow with a needle full of sleeping potion. As a result, Uncle Duck was hit with the sleeping drug and became unconscious. Thinking it was over, unexpectedly, Melly got angry, changed her personality, and attacked both Uncle Duck and the monster. The two were dejected because they couldn't rescue Uncle Duck. The blue-haired old man came to mock them, asking if they had given up on this matter yet. But Seth was very determined in his decision. He wouldn't abandon his teammate, and he would save Uncle Duck at any cost, so they went down into the sewer again. This time, Uncle Duck no longer wanted to leave. He wanted to stay with Dabai because it was also a coffee enthusiast like himself. But Seth used the horrible coffee that Melba had prepared to feed it. When it was at its weakest, Seth delivered a blow to the beast, making it dizzy. Just as Seth wanted to finish it off, Uncle Duck stood in front to protect it, saying it had never harmed anyone. Seeing this, Seth was moved, stopped his hand, and he too would join Uncle Duck in befriending the octopus Dabai. Seth tried his best to concentrate Fantasia energy from his hand, expecting a powerful punch. But no, he still couldn't control it, causing his gloves to catch fire. The blue-haired old man Yaga had given him another pair of black gloves. Though they looked cool, they functioned to block Fantasia, meaning he couldn't use magic. Learning magic without being able to use it made Seth furious. He removed the gloves but got electrocuted. Old man Yaga said he was using magic in a crude and completely wrong way, and moreover, he was damaging the gloves, which were a sorcerer's most valuable item. He criticized Seth, saying he didn't want to teach someone like that at all. But Seth stubbornly asked him, doesn't having more Fantasia mean he's stronger? But the old man completely denied this, saying if he kept trying to remove those gloves, he would explode. Seth angrily stuffed a loaf of bread into his mouth, complaining about how unreasonably the old man Yaga was bullying him. But Melba's father, Papa, didn't think so. Old Yaga was speaking the absolute truth. While he was still confused, Uncle Duck appeared, saying they had received an invitation from the high leadership of Actimus. They were very happy, but what greeted them was the news that their enormous debt had reached a disciplinary level. Hearing this, the two naive ones were still happy and wanted to celebrate. Uncle Duck angrily rushed in to scold Seth, saying it was because of them that he had to share in this debt. but currently, they really didn't have the ability to pay, so they would be expelled from Actimus. So the High Leader assigned them to clean. While Seth was tired, Melly was working 20 times harder than him. Seth felt sad, thinking if only he could use magic, life would be less difficult. Melly wondered what Uncle Duke was doing now, and somewhere in a dark, damp place, Uncle Duke was laboriously pushing a giant millstone. But thinking of Melba gave him extra motivation, so his strength was buffed up 1,000 times. Back to Seth and Melly, they discovered something very strange, so to check it out, Seth encountered old acquaintances. Judging by Seth's reaction to the two-horned man, it was understandable, but the stupid Seth still couldn't remember who they were, making them a bit disappointed. They reintroduced themselves as the infamous Blackberry robbery gang. Seth wondered, hadn't they been caught by Anma and thrown in jail? Melly also ran over, saw how they were dressed, and screamed in fear. Seth shielded Melly because they were evil sorcerers. Melly angrily ran up and attacked them. Seth was surprised that she could also use attack magic. Melly replied that she had been trying to teach herself, but her attacks didn't cause any damage to them. Among them, someone could use his bare hands to defend, and then the two-horned leader even turned his buttocks toward them and counterattacked. Melly, somewhat embarrassed, said she had discovered the mechanism of magic he was using. Without gloves or a wand, he could still use magic because of the shorts he was wearing. The leader praised Melly's keen eye and then advertised the miraculous functions of those shorts, after which he made a special pose directed at Melly. The 2 stars on his shorts accumulated energy and attacked Melly. She defended and counterattacked with another move, but the result was the same. They were still unharmed, still blocking magic with their bare hands. The leader seemed interested in the two, so he demanded that Seth remove his gloves. But Melly was worried because it would make Seth explode. But the two-horned man didn't know this, and even Friendly said to Seth that he would give him a few pairs of shorts as a souvenir. He was excited when he saw Seth's previous punch, because it was very powerful and had defeated that brutal, disgusting nemesis. The man said he empathized with Seth because in this world, those without power would always be oppressed by those with boundless power. So he wanted to become really strong and do bad things that benefited himself. Hearing these words made Seth very angry, and he shouted that his view was different from the man's. Though he wasn't strong, he wanted to learn properly rather than take shortcuts using secret techniques like them, not using power to do evil things like them. So, unable to find common ground, the 4 of them simultaneously pointed their butts at Seth and Melly, creating a cloud of dust. They thought Seth and Melly were done for. But when the smoke cleared, Melly stood in the middle of it, raising her wand to block everything. Melly had transformed. She was very angry because these useless people kept showing off. So she directly attacked with a powerful and fierce blow that sent 2 of them flying. Melly was angry that 2 had escaped, but that couldn't stop the 2 of them. Seth charged forward, surprising Melly. Though she was a bit angry, seeing Seth's smile calmed her down, and she smiled slightly, then supported Seth in attacking them. Seth flew up and delivered a kick to the head of the two-horned leader, causing him to collapse on the spot, leaving only the foolish subordinate who was confused and didn't know what to do. By this time, Melly had come beside him and said with a cold expression, "You should sleep deeply." With those words, she waved her wand at him, causing him to fall flat into the smoke. Seth was still nonchalant and praised Melly for being cool. At this point, perhaps due to embarrassment, Melly had regained her consciousness. Her gentle self had returned, smiling at Seth and happily saying they should quickly tie up these thieves and be done. Just as she finished speaking, she was suddenly attacked from behind by the gang leader. He had subdued Melly and taken her hostage. But before he could say a few sentences, Barry had rushed in and continuously attacked his face. Melly also took this opportunity to escape from the arms of that evil person. But being attacked in the face by Barry, he couldn't see anything, lost control, stepped backward, and finally fell off the cliff. Seeing this, Seth and Melly were very panicked. Seth quickly ran over, grabbed the magic broom, and despite Melly's fear, swiftly dove down. Seth struggled internally to the extreme. He knew that if he removed those gloves, he would explode, according to the blue-haired old man Yaga. But in this critical moment, if he didn't do so, he wouldn't be able to save that man. So, tensely, he tried his best to endure the pain of electric shocks and removed the gloves, resolute in everything, just hoping to quickly save the person. Yet, no explosion occurred. He hugged the magic broom, soared forward, flew in a circle, and reappeared behind Melly with the despicable thief leader on his shoulder. Seeing them safe, Melly was overjoyed. Afterward, Seth went to apologize to the disagreeable old man Yaga, earnestly asking him not to expel him for removing the gloves. Yaga pondered silently, making Melly beside him fearfully explain. But he said he wouldn't expel Seth. It turned out that through a crystal ball, he had witnessed all of Seth's actions. He highly appreciated this and even gave Seth the repaired gloves. Meanwhile, the High Leader was leisurely eating shaved ice, happy because everything was going according to his plan. That huge shaving machine turned out to be operated by Uncle Duck below. Who knows how long he'll be turning it. Another beautiful day at Melba's coffee shop. Seth was eating and drinking comfortably, but Old Man Yaga was very tense while reading information in the newspaper. There was something that worried him. If they weren't careful when confronting it, it would be very dangerous. That said, looking at Seth's face, he didn't seem to understand anything. Meanwhile, Dragon was leisurely fishing from the airship. The deputy asked if he could catch enough fish to feed the entire ship. He confidently replied that he would. Elsewhere, a new crew member wondered why the captain didn't seem trustworthy at all. But to his surprise, Dragon still managed to find food for dinner. He was very serious about cooking, and after finishing, he quickly invited everyone to eat. Today's menu included jumping fish salad, lamb lobster, and pasta with tomato sauce. It was unbelievable that while sitting in the air, they could obtain such appealing spoils, all seafood, which moved everyone on the ship. They couldn't believe that the captain, who normally seemed so cold, personally found food and cooked for them. One surprise after another left the new recruit extremely confused, hesitant to touch the food. The person next to him said the captain's cooking was very delicious. If injured anywhere, just eat it and you would heal immediately. Other soldiers on the ship also continuously praised him. The captain was very good and dedicated to them, which was the main reason they continued working there. The new recruit was very hesitant. He didn't think that a talented sorcerer like the captain would choose not to hunt monsters or evil people to advance in rank, but instead stay here cooking to sustain them day by day. This made the new recruit very uncomfortable because, in his heart, the captain was a hero and a role model for him to follow. So at night, he found a way to go up to the deck to meet the captain and ask about everything, seeking answers to his questions. But the captain cheerfully replied that he no longer cared about those honors, that he had given up the path of advancement long ago. At this moment, suddenly in the sky, rain clouds appeared, interrupting their conversation. The rain grew increasingly heavy, becoming a storm that blew away the deputy captain, causing everyone to hold on to each other, forming a chain that was whipped back and forth in the air. Meanwhile, the blue-haired Old Man Yaga told the children about the court, a place of power struggles, but where good people still existed. He said that among both sorcerers and humans, there were good and bad people everywhere. It didn't matter where we came from. What mattered most was the nature of the person. He said this, but also admitted to Seth and Melly that although he thought this way, he still hadn't met any good people in the court. Elsewhere, Captain Edmund, a blonde man, greeted them with a sardonic smile and a mocking tone. The eye-patched man warmly greeted him back, saying he had heard that Fat Edmund had just been captured by Nemesis creatures. Fat Edmund didn't deny it. Though a bit embarrassed to admit it, he quickly regained his composure, putting on a face that said the Nemesis was very strong and had severely damaged their ship. But fortunately, thanks to his good leadership, everything had gone smoothly. Then Fat Edmund boasted that he had handed the Nemesis over to the court and received a big profit. He didn't forget to take Dragon on a tour of his base, where he was holding sorcerers, saying they had used their own magic to disrupt the people. This astonished Dragon. He froze for a moment, then asked what they should do next, so the cunning Fat Edmund made them repair his ship. The soldiers complained about why they had to repair someone else's ship. Edmund was truly cunning. This wasn't too surprising for the rest of the soldiers because Edmund was too famous, and his reputation came from capturing many sorcerers, and currently, he had completed this mission excellently. But the new recruit still felt uncomfortable being forced to do these hateful jobs. Although Edmund had a good streak of achievements, he was nothing compared to Dragon. That was the truth because Dragon had completely given up on competition. Finally, the ship repairs were completed, while Edmund stood there with a fake smile, sarcastically thanking them for helping him fix the ship. This awkward, unpleasant conversation was resolved by the appearance of a large nemesis flying over their heads. Its huge shadow darkened the entire ship. Edmund, trembling with fear, looked at it and stammered, "It's back again. It's the nemesis that attacked my ship. It's back, which means it wants revenge." Hadn't he just boasted that he had dealt with and destroyed it? Just looking at his cowering posture was enough to understand. At this point, Dragon was very calm, saying slowly that it had flown away and had no intention of attacking them. Perhaps its target was elsewhere, and it seemed that there was a town ahead. Hearing this, Edmund was shocked, then cowardly said, "There's a town ahead? That's great." The nonchalant expression of the Fat Edmund surprised the new recruit. How could he utter such inhumane words, only thinking of his own benefit? The cowardly Edmund angrily said that had nothing to do with him. He didn't need to go to that town. His biggest enemies were sorcerers, so there was no reason for him to confront such a dangerous monster. The captain told the fat man that in this case, if the nemesis was harming people, It was essentially a sorcerer, so he couldn't ignore it. Edmund was still stubborn, making excuses that his weapons weren't upgraded with Fantasia, so he couldn't directly confront the nemesis. Dragon remained calm, saying that despite this, there must be other ways to deal with it. At this moment, a loud sound approached. The deputy had already equipped the soldiers with armor, and they were ready for battle. Dragon was very pleased with this action. He said, "You might be tired from working continuously like this, but you must be careful. This time, your opponent not only has magic, but is also a high-level danger, a giant nemesis." He smiled and said, "The victory feast in that village will be delicious." They couldn't enjoy a good meal while abandoning the people there, and then he didn't even bother to look at the angry Edmund grinding his teeth. He said to the new recruit, "Bring your bow and arrows here, and let's complete the mission together." At this point, the new recruit came to his senses and accepted the order. He also realized that he had not admired the wrong person. The captain was not only talented but also virtuous. Not unexpectedly, they won the battle and returned without any casualties. To Edmund's surprise, Dragon arrested him on charges of falsely accusing innocent people of being sorcerers and mistreating them. Edmund would be imprisoned and brought back for trial. After this incident, the new recruit also ate better than before. He no longer hesitated and had his food stolen. Seth dreamed of some old memories. In this world, sorcerers were not welcomed by humans. Seth was tied to a tree as the villagers prepared to burn him. At that time, Anma appeared as a savior, making Seth admire her and see her as an ideal for his life. Seth wanted to become a righteous sorcerer like Anma. Seth and Melly were walking on the street in the exhilarating atmosphere of the festival, with fireworks exploding everywhere. Seth was quite curious about why this place held festivals every few months. Melly thought it might be due to the moods of the high-ranking officials. Seth remarked that the yellow cat certainly knew how to enjoy life. But Uncle Duck, who was enjoying coffee in the distance, heard this and said, "No, he organizes these festivals with a purpose. He wants to raise charity funds, and additionally, frequently holding such festivals attracts international visitors, preventing the court from causing trouble here. It's a win-win situation, which is why he always tries to keep this place clean and luxurious." But with the intelligence of those two, they didn't understand anything Uncle Duck had just said. Uncle Duck wasn't too surprised by this. He reminded the young ones that instead of spending money at the festival, he advised them to participate in the broom race because that race would have a cash prize. The youngsters excitedly went to register, not expecting that the race would attract so many participants. The high-ranking leader excitedly opened the competition, and students from the academy below were all eager to participate. Seth and Melly were sad because this competition also required an entry fee, which they hadn't expected. Hearing their complaints, the ticket seller said this money would go into the national fund. At this moment, 3 troublemakers appeared from somewhere. The one in the middle, with blonde hair, mocked Seth and Melly for being weak, yet still participating in this national broom racing competition. Seth and Melly didn't care about their words, only naively wondering who they were. Seeing that they weren't being taken seriously made the group angry at being ignored. The blonde quickly regained his composure. The two beside him, one fat and one thin, immediately introduced him as the champion of the last 2 broom races, the son of a privileged, wealthy citizen named Nick. Nick wore an arrogant expression, enjoying those flattering words. Melly suddenly remembered something and softly said, "Oh, isn't this the person who uses money to buy victories, as people rumor?" Hearing this, Nick became red with anger, but then said he wouldn't argue with women. Then he turned to Seth, mocking him and saying, "You just arrived here recently, right? Your master's name is Anma, isn't it? I heard she refused to join the Actimus Academy to be independent. I wonder how strong she is to dare to do that. While joining the Actimus Academy is an honor and opportunity for sorcerers, isn't she being selfish for herself?" Whatever Nick said, the two beside him enthusiastically cheered that Nick was the best. Hearing Nick's insults about Anma, Seth angrily shouted, "She is a great sorceress. She is very strong and kind. Don't boast when you know nothing about her." Being rebuked by a newcomer made Nick lose face. He gritted his teeth and approached Seth with a challenge. If she was really that strong, then prove it by defeating him as her student. Seth didn't care and immediately accepted the challenge, causing Nick to mock him. Then, along with his 2 flatterers, Nick left. Melly asked Seth what kind of person Anma was. Melly asked because she had never heard Seth mention her before, and she was quite interested in this strict master of Seth's. When Seth was still with her, he was often mischievous and troublesome. Anma was usually very strict in teaching him, from making him hang by a rope on the balcony to clean as punishment for burning the plantation and emptying the pond. That day, he had also destroyed the livestock pen, causing them all to escape. But that was because Seth had stolen Anma's magic book and secretly learned techniques. Yet Anma discovered him, making Seth fearful. But fear was fear, and habits were habits. Taking advantage of not seeing Anma, he tried to sneak away, but before he could leave, he was caught again. But this time was different from previous times. She was very careful and told Seth that it was time for him to go to Actimus to study diligently, and she gave him her beloved broom and a pair of sorcerer's gloves. It was an acknowledgement for Seth. She had recognized Seth as a real sorcerer. She advised Seth to remember never to become a monster. Seth was surprised by this statement, but quickly smiled and replied that he would never become a monster. He would be the greatest sorcerer in history. Before running off, Seth turned back to hug Anma goodbye, sniffling with tears. Anma was also surprised by Seth's action, but then she smiled and hugged him. In their hearts, they both understood that they saw each other as family. Back to the present, Seth and Melly returned home. Seth took out the broom that Anma had given him. Though she was very strict and scary, she was very important to Seth. At the broom racing festival, in that lively atmosphere, Melba was distributing candy to everyone. With the announcement from the host, all contestants had officially gathered in the air with their magic brooms. Seth was very confident with his simple broom. He was sure he would win. At this moment, a competitor appeared beside him, and Seth's face showed disbelief. He was driving what could more accurately be called a ship, looking at its modern appearance compared to his own crude weapon and simplest equipment. At this point, the three Nicks also appeared. His broom was equipped with many advanced features, from wind-resistant sensors to instant acceleration. The current odds were 1 to 1,000. Uncle Duke below in the stands was angry because why did he have to be the one paying the race fee for them, and moreover, he had bet on them to win. If not, he would surely be hunted down. Seth reflected on himself. Though the odds weren't high, he would try his best because since coming here, he had tried very hard. From being beaten by Yaga for not knowing how to use Fantasia to being taught by Uncle Duke and sending him flying into the sky, then saving Melly from the collapsing gate. Now he couldn't lose, so the race began. Very quickly, Seth and Melly overtook other competitors to stand in second place behind Nick. The capitalist cat then drove a giant robot to attack. He couldn't let Seth win this race because Nick's father was the sponsor. But Nick avoided it, and with Melly's support, Seth successfully destroyed that robot. But Melly was still affected by the explosion. Seth flew over to hug Melly, then flew back into the race. He was about to beat Nick, but Nick used instant acceleration. Because the thrust was too strong, the two flying with him fell down. Nick crossed the finish line first. He had won. But this victory made him angry and humiliated when Seth abandoned the race to save his two henchmen. All praise was directed at Seth. Uncle Duke continued his habit of secretly watching Melba and imagining countless happy scenes with her. But the embarrassing outcome was that Melba only saw Uncle Duke as a friend. Uncle Duke was angry with the mess of work on his desk. There were many documents he needed to process. He was furious, wondering why there was so much work, but then was attracted by a letter. On it was a large heading, Nameless Nemesis. This surprised Uncle Duke. He thought that although this job could bring in a large income, it was too dangerous. A perpetually unlucky person like him should especially not get involved in such matters, and it would be best if he hid this mission document from those kids. He had to quickly put it away, but Uncle Duke didn't expect that the two of them had been standing behind him for some time and had already read that information. Uncle Duke fearfully tried to hide the mission document, but how could a pot-bellied man compete with three youngsters? So the kids got hold of the mission paper. It stated that in their town, a nemesis might have appeared, because in their town, there were many unexplained disappearances, and they had reported to the court but still hadn't received a resolution. So they sent a letter here, hoping for a talented and brave sorcerer to help them. After understanding the problem, Seth brightened up, saying he would handle that nemesis and bring peace to the townspeople. Melly was more practical. She hoped they could capture the monster alive because then the reward for this mission would be a substantial sum. Thinking about this, both of their eyes shone like stars. Seeing this, those excited expressions of theirs made Uncle Duke even more worried. He couldn't let them go and cause trouble. Where did they get the confidence to catch a nemesis when they didn't even know what it looked like? So Uncle Duke spoke up to stop them, making Seth wonder why. Didn't he usually complain about being in debt up to his neck? This was an opportunity to get out of debt. It seemed logical, but Uncle Duke was very serious about his decision. He pretended to be unwell to avoid it, but Melly said, "If you're not feeling well, I'll call for Melba's herbal tea. It can cure all ailments." Hearing about something brewed by Melba made Uncle Duke fearfully and quickly cover Melly's mouth. Did this look like someone who was unwell? Seth tried to persuade him because Uncle Duke had research experience and could use his knowledge to learn about that nemesis. But he flatly refused. He didn't want to get involved in this trouble. But unfortunately for him, the kind Miss Melba had also discovered it. She immediately asked Seth and Melly if they were going to catch a nemesis. Because of his crush, when Melba kept praising him for being brave, he changed his attitude, trying to look cool and showing off to her, saying he was the kindest person in Actimus. As happy as he was then, when he got on the ship preparing to depart, his mood changed dramatically. Uncle Duck kept grumbling throughout the trip about why he had agreed to this nonsensical, dangerous thing. He didn't want it at all, but in the end, he had to go. The blue-haired old man Yaga also came to see Seth off, worried about this foolish grandson, so he came to advise him. Out there, the world was full of dangers, and it was not yet known who was friend or foe. After they left Actimus, they were spotted by people from the court. The man knew where they were going, so he followed them and ordered the deputy to report to another general. Meanwhile, Seth's group was approaching the town. Uncle Duck told them to put away the flying broom and climb aboard his ship, reminding Seth to hide the horns on his head, because there were townspeople and court soldiers, so it was normal for them to dislike sorcerers. And there was a lot of smoke and noise here because it was the remnant of the industrial era. The town contained many machines that operated continuously, a city that always created noise. They docked at the town. When they set foot here, this town looked like a slum, although it had the highest population density. Desolate, gloomy, with extremely noisy mechanical sounds. Uncle Duck and everyone had to find the customer, the person who had sent out the mission, a person named Yida living on Street 12. But they walked around and still couldn't find that house, not even the street name. Stranger still, they had gone deep into the town, but still couldn't see anyone, not even a shadow of a person. After walking for a while, Uncle Duck collapsed from exhaustion. Perhaps it was too noisy and dusty, so he felt unwell. But at this point, Melly became afraid when she discovered that little green berry had disappeared. So, leaving Uncle Duck there to rest, Seth and Melly went back to the previous location to search. Finally, they found little green berry, but it was angry and punching Melly relentlessly. While they were having fun, something ran very quickly behind Seth. If this was a nemesis, it seemed smaller than they had thought. Seth and Melly quickly rode their brooms to chase after it, but were surprised when it appeared beside them and attacked them. Fortunately, they avoided it. But now it was more difficult as there were two nemesis creatures, and they looked identical. While they were still confused, the two nemesis combined their attacks, striking unexpectedly at Seth and Melly. They seemed difficult to deal with. When they couldn't approach or set traps, Seth recklessly rushed toward them, nimbly avoiding the attacks of the two. Then he created an extremely powerful strike against them. One of them fell heavily to the ground, which made Seth and Melly very happy. They were about to grab both for Uncle Duck when a mysterious person played a flute, causing the eyes of those nemesis creatures to turn red as if being controlled, and they all ran in one direction. Not just two of them. There were many, more than they could have imagined. Seth was flying when a hand pulled him back. He was Grim, a mysterious sorcerer. Perhaps there was some misunderstanding that made him think Seth was a bad person. He questioned Seth about who he was and what those nemesis creatures were. But seeing his manner, Seth angrily attacked Grim and refused to explain anything to that bandaged man. He told Seth that he was no match, continuously being struck and thrown back. Finally, out of anger, Seth attacked him with the strongest Fantasia move he had ever used, but it still didn't harm him. Melly discovered this and appeared to ambush Grim. However, he dodged that attack and said, "You have caused such a commotion that many people will come here." He didn't like crowds, so he left first. Seth wanted to chase after him, but below, the court soldiers had discovered the two of them. They shouted warnings, asking what they were doing here, and hurriedly reported to the captain. Seth and Melly were frightened and quickly fled. Meanwhile, a high-ranking general of the court had received the news. A building at number 12 in that town had been severely damaged, possibly caused by a sorcerer. The head of the court was General Conrad. This was the beginning of the game, a game he had always been waiting for. The beginning of the battle, the game of hunting sorcerers. The court soldiers had arrived and were pursuing Uncle Duck's group and Seth. They had to hide in trash cans. Their dirty, pathetic appearance was truly unbearable. Laughing, Uncle Duck scolded Seth, saying it was all his fault, asking what he had done to blow up that entire building. That's why it alarmed the court people, and now they had to hide like this. Seth explained that it was because of encountering that mysterious bandaged sorcerer, and there were many nemesis creatures here, not just one. Hearing this number, Uncle Duck's face was already terrified. He thought they couldn't win. If he knew the actual number, who knows how he would feel. But despite being afraid, Uncle Duck quickly became optimistic. He thought that if they could capture that number of nemesis creatures, they could change their lives and have enough money to marry Melba. Meanwhile, General Conrad was very angry because all night long, his soldiers couldn't track down those sorcerers. Then he was surprised to discover Dragon lying like a mermaid, drinking alcohol through a straw in his office. He went over, furious. Dragon calmly replied that it had been a long time since they met. But, you're still very stubborn, Conrad. Hearing this, General Conrad became angry. He said it was Captain Marvin now. But Dragon didn't care and still irreverently kept saying, Conrad. Now he was no longer Dragon's subordinate, so he didn't need to fear him. Dragon's calm and nonchalant posture made Conrad even angrier. But his furious appearance while unable to do anything said it all. Dragon reminded him to stop hunting sorcerers in that town. It was an order from General Thor. They dared to cause trouble in the city where he was staying, which was disrespectful to him. He angrily stomped his foot, but Conrad still reluctantly complied. Meanwhile, Seth's side had also avoided the court soldiers and found Yida's house, the person who had written to them. But when the man opened the door, he was unfriendly to them and said he wasn't Yida, which made Melly angry. She immediately transformed and pointed her wand directly at him. So they went inside. It turned out they were immigrants who had come to this city to find work. So when they said anything, the court just ignored them and didn't care about them, so they were used to it. But the wife of the house was very polite. She was the one who had written the letter asking for help because she knew their eldest son, Tatsu, had seen a nemesis. But just because no one believed what he said, he had denied it. But after seeing Seth's determination, he reconsidered. Tatsu led them to the place where he had seen that nemesis. But when asked by Seth about its appearance, Tatsu said he saw only one nemesis, and it was very large. Melly understood what was happening. She guessed that the large nemesis that Tatsu saw was the original one. It had created toxins and controlled the smaller ones that they had encountered last night. So the danger they were facing would be many times greater. After he took them to that place, the three of them backed up, walking along that wall, and when they broke through the door, they discovered a very large feather tree. This type of tree only appeared in places where Nemesis had been. But Seth had never seen a tree this big and with so many feathers. It showed that Nemesis had been here for a very long time. At this moment, the ground suddenly shook violently. Below, the court soldiers were rushing to evacuate. Uncle Duck astutely realized that it seemed that after hundreds of years of drilling under the ground here, it had caused instability. Perhaps this place would soon collapse, which was probably why when they arrived, there was no sign of people. Uncle Duck quickly told them they should leave this place, but Seth thought differently. If there were no people encountering the Nemesis creatures, it meant that when there were no people, they would appear. That was an opportunity for them to catch them. Meanwhile, Tatsu and the Yida family were receiving evacuation orders, but he spotted the silhouette of a broom-riding sorcerer appearing on the clock. Just as they had predicted, down here, many Nemesis had appeared, including 3 that were separated. So they targeted those 3. Seth dove straight down from above and hit it unexpectedly, causing all 3 to be unable to dodge and fall unconscious. Seeing this, Seth excitedly shouted in celebration. However, they quickly regained consciousness afterward and used their tails to attack Seth. But he was unprepared and was beaten badly. Now its tail continued to attack, causing Seth to use all his strength to stop it. But he couldn't. Melly and Uncle Duck also landed. With Melly's help and Seth's coordination, the 2 of them quickly sealed the 3 mini Nemesis. They just needed to wait for it to be sealed into that talisman, and everything would be over. With these 3, they would have a huge reward. Uncle Duck quickly imagined a dream about a happy family. There, Melba would praise them as heroes for catching 3 Nemesis creatures, wanting to marry him 3 times, wanting 3 houses, and having 3 children. As for Melly, she wanted money to have many delicious dishes to treat everyone. Perhaps the most realistic person was Seth, who only thought, "Good, now we have money to pay off debts." But unexpectedly, from the sky fell a ring of light with a few more Nemesis. So all of them had 7 Nemesis creatures. Their eyes couldn't be happier. Each one that fell down meant another chunk of money in their pockets. But that hateful Grim jumped down from the rooftop, and with one sword strike cut down all 7 Nemesis creatures. Their money also vanished into thin air. Seth was angry and wanted to fight him. But he was using the eyes on his hands to examine them and knew they wanted to capture these Nemesis alive. So they weren't the target that Grim needed to find. He quickly said goodbye and left, though he was still touched by Melly's chain on his cloak. Melly said she had cast a spell on it, so in the future, he wouldn't be able to find them anymore. Hearing this, Uncle Duck and Seth both praised Melly. Meanwhile, after leaving that place, Grim brought 2 men, and then ruthlessly threw them into the arms of demons. Just when they thought everything was over, the mini Nemesis creatures that were sleeping soundly were also awakened and ran to that familiar flute sound. And the person behind all this was a gloomy figure with white hair. Behind him were large and fierce eyes. Those eyes were none other than those of the original Nemesis. It was late, and they all went to sleep. Uncle Duck seemed unwell and said he would quickly leave this place tomorrow morning. He didn't want to stay here any longer. because a coward like him couldn't be of any help by staying here. Melly and Seth were both surprised by this decision. They wanted to persuade him badly but couldn't. Later, Seth secretly called Uncle Duck to talk after Melly had fallen deeply asleep. He told Uncle Duck about his discovery while fighting the mini-nemesis earlier that day. There was a strange symbol on it that was glowing. Hearing this, Uncle Duck was startled and opened a book. The two searched by lamplight. Each nemesis had a special mark on its body. However, if it glowed, it meant it was being controlled by a sorcerer behind the scenes, a sorcerer called a Dominator. Meanwhile, that white-haired person continued to play the flute, the melodious sound as if summoning all the mini-nemesis to return. Then he put down the flute, gently stroked the head of the large nemesis, and said sorry. Today they had suffered too many casualties. But they had been together for 15 years and couldn't give up now. Meanwhile, in the city center, a clown was inciting the townspeople. He said that the reason for the recent disturbances in the city was due to those immigrants. They had colluded with sorcerers and were about to turn this city into theirs. Hearing this, someone below discussed that the recent kidnappings might also be related to them. Additionally, he had heard that Captain Dragon had also arrived here to secretly investigate this city. Perhaps he was also plotting something. People should be careful to avoid the events of 15 years ago from happening again. Below the stage, the townspeople had completely believed the clown's words and cursed the immigrant. It was they who had come here to steal their jobs, and now they were scheming to take over the entire city. Quickly expel them from this town. On the wall, General Conrad heard these words. He was very excited. He was the one who had ordered that clown to do so. Dragon had come to find Conrad, not hesitating to expose the bad deeds he was doing. He was again using this tactic of inciting the people to hunt sorcerers and immigrants for him. But those sorcerers were just a cover. The immigrants were the real target that Conrad wanted to aim for. Conrad wasn't angry at being exposed. He was indeed angry at those immigrants. They had made this place dirtier, and they had brought infectious diseases. Dragon angrily warned him not to make things worse, or it would be like the tragedy of 15 years ago. Dragon also told him that tomorrow, General Thor and the magic users would come here. Hearing that General Thor was coming soon made Conrad fearfully pace back and forth. He would use a little force as a detonator, just as he had done 15 years ago. That horned sorcerer would be the most suitable detonator. Indeed, Dragon's argument was sharp, but it might not be enough to do anything to him. Conrad smiled slyly, breaking the weight in his hand. The sorcerer hunt would begin soon. Meanwhile, Uncle Duck remained determined to pack up and leave this place, despite Seth's attempts at persuasion. He said that even if he was immortal, he couldn't live here. The court here had ignored the appearance of the nemesis, so even if they caught them, they wouldn't get any reward. Despite sincerely wanting Uncle Duck to stay, he still left, so they quickly separated. Seth felt a bit hungry, so he went to Yida's house, hoping to beg for a meal. But when he arrived, he only found a pile of broken items. This place looked like it had experienced a very fierce fight. Outside, a kind gentleman saw Seth and Melly and inquired. Only then did they learn that this morning, the court soldiers had ordered the arrest of those with infectious diseases, immigrants, and sorcerers, as they were accused of being related to rebels. The entire Yida family had been arrested and taken to the court. This frightened Seth and Melly. Looking at the ruined ruins, Seth quickly ran to the court as directed by that local. Meanwhile, General Conrad had quickly gathered the townspeople and announced, the immigrants and those sorcerers were plotting to terrorize, seize the property, and take the lives of the entire city. It was those bugs who had brought infectious diseases to the city, so they had to stand up to fight for and protect what they had, to return the original clean air to them. The people below clamored to arrest the sorcerers and immigrants. But clearly not knowing who to arrest, they were blinded by reason and thought, why choose? Just arrest everyone. This was exactly what Conrad wanted. So the locals here used hammers and available weapons to suppress and arrest those hateful people. Meanwhile, in a hidden corner, Dragon didn't think Conrad would do these things. He had given him a chance, but in the end, he really did it. So he would no longer stand idle. He must act now. The excited crowd of people had rushed through the streets, preparing to arrest and attack the immigrants and the sick. In a dark alley, Uncle Duck was fearfully escaping. He absolutely had to leave this place. But after a few steps, he discovered in that old house all the nemesis creatures lying asleep. Uncle Duck was terrified. He couldn't believe their nest was here, and the court soldiers had done nothing about it. But before he could do anything, Uncle Duck had already been captured by General Conrad. Meanwhile, on a tall building, Tatsu was tied to a pillar, and the locals here were preparing to light torches to burn him. But Seth arrived just in time and rescued Tatsu. Then the two got on Melly's broom and flew away. Receiving urgent reports from subordinates that Seth's group was at the north gate, Conrad immediately ordered the attack with advanced cannons in that direction. without evacuating the civilians from the area. He said if they could serve the country, it would be an honor for them. After bringing Tatsu to a safe place, they learned that his parents had been arrested by the court. All of this was ordered by Conrad himself. But now the civilians had caught up. They shouted to catch the sorcerers. This frightened Seth, and he called for Melly to run away. But at this moment, Melly had already transformed. She angrily pointed her wand at the direction of the townspeople, ready to attack if they approached. But Seth stopped her, hugging Melly and Tatsu as they ran away. Because they couldn't harm innocent people who had been manipulated by Conrad, who were only acting out of fear. If they wanted to deal with anyone, they should deal with Conrad and the court soldiers. Before he could finish, cannon shells were fired at them. Conrad stood proudly and announced that they were surrounded and should quickly surrender. From the smoke, Seth continuously attacked the court soldiers. However, Conrad, commanding his talented troops, blocked all of Seth's attacks. Fortunately, with Melly's support, the two of them managed to break through the defensive layer of soldiers. But it was General Conrad himself who took action, making Seth no match for him, and he was subdued. Melly also had her wand broken by Dragon, and then they brought out Uncle Duck to threaten them. So Seth had to lie still and be tied up. Melly was locked up with Uncle Duck, who looked very haggard. Meanwhile, Seth was held by the head by Conrad, who wanted to dispose of him. But thanks to Dragon's reminder that Lord Thor wanted Seth captured alive, he ordered someone to wrap bandages around Seth's hands so he couldn't use magic. Seeing this childish action, Dragon softly reminded him, "That one is not as normal as you think," and then left. At this moment, Melly woke up and wanted to save Uncle Duck, but couldn't because this was a black iron prison, so magic couldn't be used. Uncle Duck tried his best to tell Melly that there were many nemesis here, then exhaustedly passed out. Conrad brought Seth and Tatsu to stand before the townspeople. He proudly announced that this was the evil sorcerer he had just captured. Indeed, the immigrants had cooperated with these sorcerers to rebel and terrorize this city. As a protector of the city, he had captured him, and it was he who had stored a nest of nemesis in a nearby building. These people were behind all the strange events that had occurred. Hearing these words, they felt afraid. The shouting of the people made Conrad even more excited. Seth was very angry. Clearly, those mini-nemesis were controlled by another nemesis. Conrad scoffed. He knew, of course, so clearly. He wanted to blame everything on the sorcerers and immigrants. He had closed all the city gates, trapping the people in District 12. Before their shock, he said, "Very sorry, but you know too much, so I have to kill everyone here." Seth, frightened and angry, exploded and gathered powerful Fantasia streams from his hand, delivering a strong blow towards Conrad. Knocked down from the wall, Conrad was furious. He took out an unnamed potion from his pocket, drank it, and immediately grew much larger, turning into a purple-skinned monster. Then he ordered the cannons to fire at the civilians. Upon receiving the order, the soldiers acted. Watching the shells fly towards the innocent people, Seth could do nothing. Fortunately, at this moment, the bandaged Grimm appeared, using magic to absorb all those shells, saving the innocent people. He asked Seth if he and the sorcerer controlling the nemesis knew each other. Seth had never even met him, so how could they know each other? Grimm used bandages to wrap Seth's wounded arm. Very quickly, he no longer felt pain. Grimm said the bandage was made from the feathers of that feather tree. It contained Fantasia that would quickly heal wounds. Then Grimm turned toward those soldiers, returning all the bullets on his body back at them. With just one move, he quelled those disorderly soldiers. But at this moment, on that clock tower, a powerful Fantasia appeared, like a swirling vortex enveloping the entire city. Grimm quickly flew over to stop that woman. Meanwhile, Seth wanted to go with Grimm, but was blocked by that hateful Conrad. He was indifferent to the fact that those nemesis would destroy the entire city. Because he was the mastermind, spending a lot of money to hire her to come here to work. That's why he was indifferent to the fact that nemesis were appearing in the city. This man was truly cunning, treating people's lives as worthless. On Melly's side, she was locked in the same cage as Uncle Duck. Melly noticed that his pulse was no longer beating. She fearfully cried out, and little green berry quickly flew over with the cage key. Thanks to this, Melly escaped. She came to rescue the court soldiers who were in danger from a mini-nemesis. Grimm had great difficulty attacking the mini-nemesis because there were so many of them. He wondered why she chose this moment to appear, as she had been hiding for 15 years. Seth couldn't fight against this hateful Conrad. He had a supreme spear, and moreover, its purity was 72%, completely resistant to Fantasia. Tatsu wanted to open the city gates to free everyone, but to do that, he had to get past that hateful Conrad. Down here, chaos was everywhere. A woman carrying her child ran, begging for help from the court soldiers. But they were heartless, even more frightened when they saw that nemesis chasing her. She still begged, at least save her child. But they still didn't care. Right after, that nemesis was taken down by Lord Dragon's arrow. He mocked the soldiers. "You once promised to use your lives to protect the people, didn't you?" At this moment, they were ashamed of this. Suddenly, a loud sound rang out behind Lord Dragon, but it was because Melly had managed to eliminate a nemesis. She fearfully faced Dragon's arrow, but he shot the one in the distance and had no intention of killing Melly. Meanwhile, that woman was playing the flute, making extremely powerful fantasia whirl all over the sky. Right after this, she would show everyone her performance. All people would no longer have the chance to see tomorrow. Even Conrad didn't know what she was saying anymore. He looked confused by these words. Then she launched an even stronger attack. Grimm also detected the danger and importance of the issue, so he quickly ran to the bell. Up here, Seth used all his strength to resist that Conrad. Seth had reached his limit, but still tried to buy time for Tatsu to run and open the city gates. Seth threw his shoe in his face, even took away his beloved beard, stuck it on his own face, and taunted him. Down here, Tatsu had successfully sneaked in and opened the city gates. But unfortunately, the city gates had 2 layers of doors. Tatsu was grabbed by the neck after successfully opening the outer layer of doors. Seth also knew this. This Conrad was truly insidious. He knew Seth's left hand could no longer be used, so now the chance of winning belonged to him. Whether that spike fell and crushed the people here or not, it had nothing to do with him. In Conrad's heart, there was only fame and himself. He laughed savagely. Finally, this day had come. It was this day. On the other side, she laughed like him. With the same ambition, they were both bad people with a common ideology, truly terrible villains. The monsters that brought disaster were called nemesis, and the only ones who could destroy them were sorcerers. However, sorcerers were considered carriers of disease and were avoided. From the sky, the bell tower carried strong winds like a vortex, blowing away the townspeople. Conrad shouted, asking her what she wanted to do. The woman slowly removed the hat she was wearing and offered to tell a sad story from the past. 15 years ago, the court had taken custody of infected children and planned to turn them into soldiers to fight Nemesis, including Busit, Han, and Greta. The children were named the defense team. They were not welcomed by the townspeople and were thrown into prison with violent criminals and illegal immigrants. Each day that passed was like hell for the children, but they still encouraged each other and tried their best to survive. One day, when the people outside were shouting and cursing the children as diseased, as monsters, and wanting to drive them away. Sitting in the cell, hearing these insults about themselves, the children were sad and asked themselves why they had to endure such derogatory words from the townspeople. Outside the prison door, a large man suddenly played a flute. The sound of the flute calmed the children. After playing, he said they weren't monsters, to ignore the people, and if their voices were too loud, to play the flute so they wouldn't have to hear anymore. The man's terrible flute playing successfully made the children laugh. The white-haired girl asked who the man was. He said his name was Asum and gave the girl his flute, then advised her, despite differences in language and culture, music would still warm the heart, and the kids would find someone to create wonderful melodies with. The girl played the flute, but her melody wasn't much better than Asum's, making him and the children laugh loudly. For the children, Asum had changed the atmosphere of this hell prison. But in parallel, there was someone who didn't like that. On a moonlit night, when the children were sitting playing the flute, a jailer used a crossbow to threaten them. He told them about his hatred for immigrants and infected people, saying they were vermin, monsters that shouldn't appear in this place. When at that moment, Major Asum appeared and asked what he was doing. The jailer lied, saying he was just reminding the kids to be quiet. Nevertheless, Asum reminded the jailer, Conrad, not to treat the children as monsters, and that the children were human just like him. But Conrad didn't accept being equal to the kids. He angrily asked permission to leave. One night, Conrad pretended to be an ally of the children and released them. But then he spread the news to the townspeople that the defense team had escaped on their own. When they heard the news, the people feared getting infected, so they blocked the road and massacred the children. By the time Asum arrived, only the white-haired girl remained. Back at the prison, Asum held the girl in his arms, expressing regret, and promised to protect her. Conrad, hiding in the darkness, still harbored hatred. Not long after the incident, Nemesis fell from the sky, causing chaos among the townspeople. Conrad suggested evacuating the people and using the defense team to fight against the Nemesis. Although Asum didn't want to, he had to accept and promise to stay by the girl's side to protect her safety. However, Conrad betrayed him. He used a sword to stab Asum. Asum used his last strength to stop Conrad and let the girl escape. While running, the girl tripped, and the flute also fell to the ground. The girl remembered the happy memories with her friends and Asum. Out of sadness, she held the flute in her hand and played a tune. The gentle sound of the flute echoing everywhere lured the Nemesis to surround the girl. They surrounded her, staring at her. She thought they would attack her, but they didn't do anything. It seemed they just wanted to listen to the flute. Seeing an injured nemesis, she felt empathy for them. The girl thought they probably didn't want to come to this place either. The army fired bullets everywhere, making the entire town fall from the sky. Witnessing Road 13 collapse, the girl and the nemesis left together. From that day on, the girl's heart also grew cold. Back to the present, it turned out the storyteller was that child from years ago. In the past, after the incident, Conrad blamed the immigrants and told the captain that the end of Road 13 was to save the city. He believed that immigrants were the source of sin. They were the dirty ones, bringing infectious diseases, and moreover, because of them, this place lost its ecological balance and jobs. They had to pay for the immigrants and still had to endure that infectious disease. In general, the more he talked about it, the angrier Conrad became, because he hated these immigrants so much. The townspeople unanimously turned around, pointing their spears at him and standing on the woman's side, thinking the woman would save the people. But she said she wanted to kill everyone. Someone spoke up, saying they weren't involved because they didn't live here 15 years ago. But she angrily retorted that they had tried to kill the infected children and innocent sorcerers, so they were no different from Conrad. To her, they were enemies and must be punished. The woman played the flute, calling a vortex. At that moment, the mysterious sorcerer wearing a hat and a face wrapped in white bandages said there was one more thing he wanted to ask her, then used his power to break the vortex. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Conrad called for the army to fire cannons at them. The army hesitated, fearing that doing so would harm the townspeople. But he had many times disregarded the lives of the people, so this time was no different. He still gave the order and didn't care about the people at all. Seth confronted Conrad. He believed that the girl's hatred was caused by Conrad, and Conrad was the weakest. Too angry at being called weak, Conrad used his weapon to charge straight at him, but was repelled by him with one hand. Conrad was surprised by his strength. Both rushed at each other. Even now, he still believed that the existence of infected people was a crime, and eliminating them wasn't blameworthy. He was truly angry at his words and shouted loudly that they were sorcerers, not bugs, then used his power to hit him directly in the stomach. His power seemed to increase. Using just his legs, he knocked Conrad far away. He realized that the boy had the ability to freely control Fantasia. Indeed, it was extraordinary. Controlling with hands was already very difficult, but this time it was with both legs, truly eye-opening for Conrad. Not accepting that he was weaker, Conrad concentrated all his strength and attacked Seth relentlessly. He used his hand to throw Seth into the air, then used his weapon to shoot at him. While he was self-satisfied that he was the wall protecting the city's safety, Seth had already absorbed his weapon. He said if he was a wall, he would break through this wall, then used his power to charge straight at Conrad. Under his great power, the entire citadel seemed to collapse, and Conrad's supreme weapon, a spear that wasn't affected by Fantasia, also shattered, creating a massive explosive shock. The weapon was gone. What would Conrad attack with next? The battle was beginning to become uneven. After the massive shock, smoke billowed in all directions, turning the surroundings into a wasteland. Conrad lay collapsed on the ground. Only his tattooed arm could be seen reaching up. Seth was still struggling to stand, but a part of Conrad's weapon was still stuck in his hand. He used his strength to pull it out, then collapsed to the ground from exhaustion. Having no strength left, people surrounded the city walls, realizing that the wall had collapsed. For them, this was freedom. Tatsu emerged from the ruins, his mouth still bearing traces of blood. Seth slowly opened his eyes to see everyone happily surrounding and hugging Tatsu. He stood up with a bright smile. At this moment, someone unexpectedly interrupted, saying there was an order to arrest him. It was Black Thor with red eyes, his left eye covered with an eye patch, and a long scar on his nose. Seth was truly dissatisfied that now he was saying he wanted to arrest him, but in response, he coldly said, "You be quiet and come with me." For him, arresting the boy was a mission that couldn't be ignored. At this moment, the balls supporting the island suddenly disappeared as if dissolving into the air. The people shouted in fear that the city would be destroyed. Seth was worried and wanted to run to see what was happening, but was grabbed by the bandaged man with the covered eyes. He asked him why. At this moment, he wasn't trying to save the people, but only cared about arresting him. Is this how the court works? What are you fighting for in the end? He also didn't know what he was fighting for, but he thought the boy's ideals were meaningless. For Seth, his ideal was to find Radiant and destroy it, and that wasn't meaningless. It would help change the world. He thought the boy was just talking big, and now they should find a way to deal with the person who had tamed the nemesis. Seth said that without his reminder, he was already planning to do so, and they both went their separate ways. But he didn't forget to remind him that after the battle ended, he would throw him in a cage. On the court's high-speed warship, an old man was reporting on Captain McBoot's behavior. He had supported Dragon in causing chaos and concealing evidence. On the ship, a tall man with dark blue hair, holding a glass of wine, said he couldn't believe Conrad would do such things. But a short-haired woman smoking a pipe said Conrad was just a useless discriminator. Sitting in the chair next to her, a woman with long, light blonde hair thought that Conrad was seduced by a sorceress, which was why he acted that way. She shyly asked Santry, only to discover he wasn't listening, but was dozing off. She was furious, smoke coming out of her ears as she called him to wake up. Outside the window, the red-haired man, General Thor, spoke up, saying Captain Dragon claimed to have evidence, and everyone would know the truth soon. But their target was something else. Outside the ship, a person with a hooded face revealed a strange smile. General Thor approached and asked him if he sensed anything. But he just said nothing and wanted to go check. Thor asked if he needed his help, to which he replied that he just needed to arrive before the island sank. While speaking, he stood on the bow of the ship, turned his back, fell, and then flew straight ahead. As people walked out, Thor said their target was the Horned Sorcerer, and the remaining sorcerers would be thrown into the Red Room. Seth ran with all his might and saw smoke billowing from the top of the bell tower. It turned out the bandaged sorcerer and the woman who had tamed the nemesis were fighting there. The girl played the flute, winds blowing in all directions, attacking the sorceress simultaneously. The nemesis also used its tail to attack, but was countered by him using the Procella technique, creating power to block it, injuring the nemesis. She angrily played the flute. The winds surrounded her, forming a solid shield that made the sorcerer's sword charge ineffective. The sorcerer had to use a technique to create a smoke screen, then suddenly appeared behind her, holding his sword against her neck. He asked who had taught her how to tame Nemesis, whether it was Behemoth or Siren, but it was neither, so he decided he would just kill the Nemesis. The girl shouted, "Don't you dare!" then used the hidden sword in her flute to attack him, wounding him, after which he escaped. Melly lay on the pile of ruins, only now regaining consciousness. Remembering past events and the present, she felt useless and lost control, using her sword to slash everywhere. Each of her slashes cut the Nemesis in half. A figure appeared behind her. Seeing this, she wanted to cut that person, but surprisingly, it was Seth. He blocked her hand and called out Melly's name loudly to calm her down. When Melly had calmed down, she suddenly burst into tears and kept saying Uncle Duck's name. Then Seth pulled out from his pocket a baby that looked exactly like Uncle Duck, making her scream in surprise. It turned out he had detected strange fantasia and had found Duck, but Duck was unconscious, making him think he was dead. But inside his coat, baby Duck appeared. The reason for this strange occurrence was that Duck had been cursed with body separation. Seeing baby Duck safe, Melly hugged him tightly, making the little one almost suffocate. Then suddenly, the bandaged sorcerer came to announce that everyone should run away because the Dominator and Nemesis were very powerful. If they wanted to defeat it, they would have to kill the girl who had tamed the Nemesis. Melly wanted to restrain the Nemesis so Seth could kill the Dominator, so Grimm said he would support them. The girl controlling the Nemesis was standing high, looking at the city when Seth's group rushed over. She played the flute, calling the Nemesis to attack, but Seth had used his skill to destroy them. But due to the large number of Nemesis, they attacked simultaneously, making him fall into a vortex. Seth dreamed he was falling, then woke up to find himself in the bell tower, facing a man with a hood completely covering his face. He said he wanted to meet him, then removed his hood. He was surprised to see the face of a young man with 2 horns on his head and an X-shaped scar on his forehead. Outside, Melly was worried about Seth, but the sorcerer said Seth was still safe, and they decided to carry out the plan. Grimm appeared and attacked the Dominator but was countered by her. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Melly rushed out to ambush her but was blocked by the Nemesis. The girl's power was overwhelming, attacking Melly and injuring her all over. At this point, the Dominator's power was also weakening because Melly had sealed her Fantasia power in the lamp. The sorcerer took out a magic paper from his pocket containing a large Tannable inside. Using the Tannable, the sorcerer destroyed the Nemesis. Meanwhile, Seth and the other person asked for names. This person identified himself as Byron. He asked if the bandage on Seth's face was a sealing charm so he could use all his strength. But Seth only said it was a bandage to cover the scar from fighting the first Nemesis. Byron said he still hadn't used all his sealed power and asked him who he was fighting for. Seth suddenly remembered something. He didn't answer but just thanked Byron and rushed off, leaving Byron with the words that Seth was his beloved family. Outside, the Dominator still kept Nemesis in a scroll. She had combined Nemesis and Fantasia, making her power stronger and attacking with fierce vortices. On the ground, cracks suddenly appeared. From the cracks, lightning appeared, and he said, "Finally, I did it," with a face full of confidence. Seth jumped from the ground. The girl controlling the nemesis saw this and moved back a distance from him. Seth asked if her name was Domitor. In response, she only knew him as the sorcerer who had fought with Conrad. She was surprised that Seth had fallen from such a height and was still unharmed. Instead, he had come directly to confront her. The girl didn't hesitate to swing an attack at Seth, but fortunately, he dodged it. Immediately, she attacked Seth again. But this time, Seth didn't dodge, but used his hand to block the sword hidden in the flute. She asked Seth what his purpose was in coming here. He said gruffly that he came to stop her from destroying the island. Saying this, he swung his fist, but she dodged it. She didn't think he would be able to defeat her. The nemesis's tails emerged from the magic paper, each creating whirlwinds that gathered to attack Seth directly. Melly and the bandaged sorcerer were inclined to flee because the tower was about to collapse. And if they died, they wouldn't be able to save anyone. But Melly was still very worried about Seth. Despite being attacked by fierce whirlwinds, he was unharmed and counterattacked. For him, these things were nothing compared to Anma's punishments or Yaga's training exercises. His fists swung repeatedly at her, but she still dodged and blocked with her flute. Worried that the distance between the two was too close, the tails appeared again, creating whirlwinds that helped the girl fly up into the air, creating a greater distance. From above, the storms from the nemesis tails attacked Seth again. He also gathered Fantasia into his fist, and then used a burning technique to release extremely powerful magic. The two powers blocked each other, unable to determine a winner. But at this moment, the girl's magic was overwhelming him. She said he was only helping his enemy. Seth refuted her words, saying he was just protecting the people on the island. She was very angry when he said he wanted to protect the people. To her, they didn't deserve protection. It seemed that anger had increased the girl's power. Seth took her attack. That tremendous power had made the bell tower shake violently. Seth's face was full of wounds, but he could still get up. He said that those things were because of Conrad, so they just needed to defeat him. Before he could finish his sentence, the girl asked what solving one person in the court would accomplish. But Seth thought that harming people just because they discriminated was no different from Conrad. She told him that no matter how hard he tried, they still wouldn't accept him, but would see him as infected, and advised him to stand on her side. Seth refused to stand on her side. Unlike her, he used magic to protect people. The two were completely different. Rejected, she didn't hesitate to release storms at Seth. The girl's past involved being separated from her mother from a young age, being discriminated against, and having to stand up and fight when Nemesis appeared. Seth couldn't withstand the blow and was thrown far away. From above, the Nemesis storm gathered and struck straight at Seth. The storm, much larger than before, blew Seth all around. In this dangerous situation, he alone resisted the large, swirling storm. Each of her sentences reminded him of his childhood, being locked in a cage, tied up, and people trying to kill him. Having everything stolen from him, each memory appeared, but he continuously denied, saying wrong. He no longer resisted the storm because now they were both alike. The created storm blew objects everywhere. Cracks appeared in the ground, and people ran in panic. Grin realized the battle was about to end as the amount of Fantasia gradually disappeared. Seth was negotiating with her. He couldn't forgive the people's behavior, and he had once wanted to destroy them. But Anna had told him not to harm them. The girl told Seth that what she was doing was necessary, and she wasn't doing this just for revenge. Seth understood her feelings, and then the girl rested her head on Seth's shoulder. Both stood in the eye of the storm. At the moment the girl lost her guard, he pulled the string tying the paper containing the nemesis and threw it into the vortex. He said he didn't want to become a monster as they thought. The girl glared when she discovered Seth's action. Just as she wanted to take the sword to attack, Seth had already grabbed it and swung it up. From the outside, the huge storm had disappeared into the air. The entire island stopped shaking, and the people wondered if the battle was over. The storm ended, leaving Seth holding the holy sword beside his shoulder. The girl was lying on the ground. She said she had fallen into Seth's trap and thought Seth would hand her over to the court or finish her off himself. But no, Seth had no intention of doing so. Instead of choosing between the two sides, why didn't she choose both? Seth wanted to pursue his own wish of destroying Radiant. If Radiant was destroyed, Nemesis would disappear, and he, the girl, and everyone could be friends. After speaking, he revealed a carefree smile, but there was a warmth in it. She thought that was impossible, but Seth had pulled her up and said it was possible. Let's change the world together. Suddenly, from the gray sky, a dazzling light opened up, growing larger and larger. A giant old man, his entire body full of brilliant light, appeared from the beam. In the sky, people saw the court's warship. The people shouted as if they were saved and called for the court to arrest the infected people. The eye-covered man was observing the situation from above when a subordinate, addressed as captain, asked if the rescue team had arrived. He said yes, but they used such magnificent magic, which wasn't good. Melly's group ran to Seth. He asked if this was magic, and Grimm informed him it wasn't because there was no sign of Fantasia. This was the court's miracle. The giant man spoke, telling everyone to lower their weapons and hand over the horned sorcerer, Seth, who was suspected of murdering Colonel Vivian, causing damage and attempting to assassinate the council member of Poniton, kidnapping and assaulting Medin Cooler, being complicit in the massacre at Vivian, and burning down the northern forest. A series of charges were brought forth, but Seth didn't know anything and only felt that these names were very familiar. Suddenly, the girl controlling the nemesis held a sword to Seth's neck and told the court she would hand him over. Hearing this, the giant old man laughed loudly, saying she had repented. He asked her name, and she said Hamelin. But he said the court didn't work with criminals, though that was only a name because Seth was very important to them, which was why they personally came to arrest him. Hamelin's condition was to release the imprisoned sorcerers and stop hunting them, but without hesitation, he immediately refused. Hamelin sat down, picked up the paper containing the nemesis, and said her request was for all of them to die, then released storms at them in succession. The old man exclaimed that the storm had dispelled Santori's reflection. Realizing the warship was coming, Hamelin threw the paper to Seth, instructing him to run and keep his siblings inside safe and not to view them as monsters. She raised his chin, bringing her lips close to his, then immediately pushed him away with the flute. She walked towards the giant old man. Seth was pulled away by Melly's group, flying far away. He shouted loudly, worried that Hamelin would be captured. But Grimm told him that was her purpose because she wanted to buy time for Seth to escape. The powers of both sides appeared, blocking each other. But her power suddenly drained because Thor, standing behind her for some time, had stabbed her with a sword. Blood flowed from her mouth. Her words before falling were hoping that Seth would change the world. Seth witnessed the entire event. His face was now full of anger. Seth lost his composure. He shouted loudly, using his magical power to charge straight at Thor. But Vance appeared from somewhere, blocked him, and threw him away. Thor thought he was a court person and shouldn't act so radically, but Vance just said that dangerous criminals like that should be made unconscious. After speaking, he raised his weapon once more to attack Seth. Byron stood in the shadows, observing the event. Suddenly, he widened his eyes toward Seth, who also showed strange signs. His eyes were all white, as if he had lost all reason. Then a large explosion occurred on the bell tower, blowing everything away. In the thick black smoke, only Seth remained, one hand punching the ground. His face was now fierce, the horns on his head and his magic glowing, his entire body emitting a massive amount of Fantasia. Santori laughed loudly from above. He felt Seth's power was terrifying. Vance got up, covering his eyes. He was very angry because Seth had injured him. With his anger, he jumped up to attack Seth. But with just one punch, Seth sent Vance flying far away in a cloud of dust. Santori controlled the giant man's arm to attack Seth, but the boy jumped up, using magical power to make the giant disappear. After being attacked by Seth, Santori's hand swelled red. He saw that the boy was formidable when angry and wanted to rest for a few minutes before attacking. But the brick debris from the battle was about to fall on the people, so Santori had to use the giant hand to block the bricks. Thor approached Seth. He saw that the boy was now no different from a wild animal that had lost its composure, and said he would subdue him before he caused danger. Seth roared danger, the cry like that of an animal, his power erupting into the air. Thor stood his sword upright and said something like an incantation. In the name of the head of the court, pierced through the darkness with holy light. After speaking, a halo appeared behind him. Thor swung each slash, cutting the ground into several parts, but Seth still dodged. From the thick dust, Thor rushed to strike Seth. Seth cried out in pain. He discovered that the boy's hand was gradually losing its connection with Fantasia, and he wouldn't be able to maintain this form much longer. Seth growled, using his fist to strike Thor's holy sword. His power was like a storm being released. Santori used his hand to break the power flow, not allowing it to fly far. The court people were very surprised that Seth could hold out so long when confronting Thor. Thor used his sword to throw Seth off the edge of the bell tower. He hung in midair, clinging to the floor, but the giant, Santori, who controlled it, had come to punch the floor, shattering it and causing him to fall. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the giant used his arm to catch Seth, but he had disappeared. The court lost track of Seth's group. Thor ordered Lot to lead the reconnaissance team, Mina to lead the rescue team, and he would go to check on Vance. The island was now as ruined as a wasteland. Grimm and Melly tightly held Seth, who was wrapped in bandages all over, gliding through the wind with magic. Melly asked Seth what had happened to make him like this. She had never seen him in this state, but Seth remained silent, saying nothing. Grimm interrupted, saying now was not the time to worry because the Empire was hunting them. At this moment, Grimm took out a chest, inside which were countless human arms reaching up. It turned out they were people who had had contact with Nemesis, or had witnessed Conrad's crimes, whom Grimm had taken away to avoid danger. Duck was dazedly leaning against the chest when Melly discovered him. He wriggled like a baby, afraid of being locked up again. Melly quickly picked Duck up and comforted him. She wondered how they could leave the island with Seth and Duck like this. But Grimm said not to worry because someone had come to pick them up. A wind blew, and in the sky was a ship with the strange shape of a cat from Actimus. A man dressed in colorful clothes, holding a loudspeaker, told Melly's group that they had come on Majesty's orders. Meanwhile, the blonde woman from the court was ordering the army to provide first aid to the people, leaving the pursuit of the escaped sorcerers for later. Dragon was standing high, looking at the island when Thor approached. He said he had heard the report about Conrad. Dragon bowed his head, apologizing for failing to stop Conrad. But Thor thought that was everyone's fault, not just Dragon's, and he had successfully controlled his emotions to save innocent people. Centauri was dozing off when suddenly fireworks shot up, waking him. Fireworks exploded in all directions in the sky, making him think this was an enemy attack, and they were trying to make the court lose vigilance. Suddenly, a soldier called to the captain, "Look!" In the sky were a bunch of cat-shaped balloons in various colors, rising with fireworks exploding behind them. The scene was now beautiful, just like a festival. The people happily watched the fireworks. They saw this as an announcement that the conflict had ended and hoped that things would be better in the future. Mixed in with the fireworks and balloons, the ship carrying Seth's group slowly departed. Seth, still wrapped in bandages, lay motionless. They flew through the night, the next destination of the ship being Actimus. Seth was immersed in a dream. He reached out, and each of his memories gradually appeared, one by one. Suddenly, the memory stopped. Hainlin appeared before him. She approached, whispered in his ear, "Goodbye, kid," and then vanished, leaving Seth sitting there, blaming himself for not being able to save her. His purpose in coming to the island was to catch Nemesis, but everything had become a mess. Byron appeared from behind Seth with an expressionless face. Seth asked what he had done to him. Byron said he had been nearly dead, and that was the only way to save him. Seth blamed Byron for changing him like that without permission, but Byron asked if he was willing to be killed alongside his friend by the enemy. He recalled that at that time, he couldn't distinguish who was a friend and who was an enemy, and memories kept flooding into his head, memories he didn't know belonged to whom. Byron explained that it was his power that he didn't know about. Byron simply helped him access them. Seth wondered who he was, and with such a similar appearance to his, were they brothers? Byron replied that he was his older brother, surprising Seth greatly. Seth's mood was still sad. He felt guilty about Hainlin, thinking that just destroying their evil would be okay. But Hainlin was a different case. Byron consoled him, saying he had already defeated Conrad, but out there, many like Conrad still existed. Could he destroy them all with his power? Byron couldn't answer Seth's question. Seth hoped he would leave him alone. Remembering Hainlin's sad face, Seth blamed himself again for not being able to help anyone. Dawn broke. Seth's group had reached Actimus. Seth was still unconscious on the bed. Duck and Melly were arguing noisily, waking Seth up. He called Duck and Melly's names. She burst into tears beside Seth because she was so worried about him. Sitting up, seeing himself wrapped in bandages, he asked if Grimm had wrapped them for him. Duck suddenly shrank back, saying not to mention his name in case he appeared. And Grimm really did appear. He came to check on him. Seth thanked him for saving him, but Grimm said there was no need to thank him. If Grimm hadn't mistaken him for an accomplice of the Dominator, he would have saved him earlier. While speaking, Seth suddenly felt pain from the wound caused by Thor. Because he had the ability to neutralize Fantasia, separate magic in the body, and make magical objects ineffective. This wound couldn't be healed by ordinary magic, and he might not be able to use Fantasia with his injured arm anymore. But Seth felt that was also good because with this arm, what he could do was violent and reckless. Suddenly remembering, he asked how the island was. He learned that it had already been restored by the Imperial Army. Conrad was gone. No one knew what would happen to the city, but perhaps it would be better. Seth said that in the end, the court had saved the island. Seth asked what had happened to the Nemesis. He was told to believe they were living peacefully in the Academy's detention facility. Night fell. In the large castle, Majesty was leisurely eating ice cream. A subordinate reported that they had followed his orders, but Majesty said he didn't remember giving such orders, then told the subordinate to leave. Afterward, he revealed a strange smile and said things were starting to get interesting. Seth sat alone on the bed, contemplating something. Some time had passed since the incident on the mechanical island. Seth's group had returned and lived in peace. However, Melly and everyone else noticed that Seth kept eating continuously, which they found very strange. Seth had changed, becoming more subdued, no longer having the lively and naive demeanor as usual, only a dazed mind, wandering around like a soulless person. Even when they went to Melba's coffee shop, Melly and Melba happily hugged each other because finally, Melly and Seth had returned safely. But they didn't see Uncle Duck anywhere, which made Melba wonder. Seth gently released him from his neck. Seeing Melba's surprise, Melly explained that due to an incident in the Sound Town, he had become small like this. Uncle Duck had intended to hide because he knew there was no longer any chance for him and Melba. Before it was difficult, now it was impossible, but beyond Duck's expectation. Melba liked this small version of him. She hugged him to her chest and was endlessly delighted. She even offered to change diapers for Uncle Duck, making him both pleased and embarrassed, with a bit of anticipation. Uncle Duck secretly thought, could Melba be about to see my teacups? However, things didn't turn out as Uncle Duck thought. The person who changed the diapers was Melba's papa. He looked like he no longer wanted to live, until Melba told them that Seth, Melba, and Duck were now becoming very famous. They had been in the newspaper with the headline, "The biggest debtor of Actimus has become a superhero." They had rescued the Mechanical Island, a place that seemed to have been destroyed by that evil, wicked sorcerer controlling the Nemesis. Hearing this, Seth suddenly paused, surprised that they would talk about him like that, an evil sorcerer. Hearing these words made Seth feel hurt. Suddenly, at this moment, a letter was delivered from the sky by the leader cat. He was very pleased with their glorious victory. Therefore, he would host a celebration party at his palace. Everyone was delighted to hear about the royal party, except for Uncle Duck, who was sad. He was certain that the stinking cat would add up debt for everyone after the party, thus becoming indebted with more debt. Additionally, Melba would also attend the party, so wouldn't that mean Uncle Duck would have to watch her dance with other men, not himself, because he was currently too small. At the party organization, people gathered to celebrate happily. Melly, Seth, and Duck were also happily dressed elegantly. They looked very different from their usual selves. Because he wanted to dance with Melba, Duck spent all his savings to go to a chemical store to buy growth medicine, since it would have a random effect at some point. Uncle Duck was only a little bigger. This place was indeed lively, with delicious food prepared by Actimus's top chefs. It was a truly luxurious party. At this moment, the lights around suddenly went out, leaving only the stage in the center. The host came out to entertain. Next, they invited everyone to welcome the city's hero, the Debt King. So the Debt King landed painfully. That cat was being boastful. He boasted that Seth was a hero, but ultimately, if Seth hadn't come to Actimus, he would just be a nobody. In conclusion, Seth's success was largely due to him. Truly a shameless cat. Seth's achievements included defeating a court general, defeating a Dominator sorcerer, capturing many nemesis, and saving an entire town on the verge of collapse. However, his most record-breaking achievement was setting the record for the most debt in Actimus. This didn't make Seth happy at all. He couldn't be happy looking at what he had gone through. That truth, that pain, couldn't be healed. He was always troubled by this, but people were interested and praised him as a hero. When asked about his next plan, Seth said he wanted to destroy Radiant. Everyone in the audience was bewildered. What was Radiant? Was it something from legend? Although they weren't clear, they still didn't care as long as the hero wanted to do it. Even if there were 100 Radiants, they could be destroyed. Seth had great difficulty escaping from the crowd, crawling out with a helpless expression. When he regained his composure, he encountered Nick's group. Nick thought Seth became a hero just by luck, and if he had been there, he could have won more wisely. If Seth didn't believe it, they could have a challenge, and it would be clear. Looking at the intricate map in Nick's hand made Seth weary. He had no interest in this matter. Seeing Seth ignore him, Nick became angry and cursed Seth. Provoking his pain made Seth furious. He punched very hard towards Nick and shouted loudly, "What do you know about her to say that? She also just wanted to survive and exist. She had suffered too much, which is why I will destroy Radiant at all costs. Change the order of this world so that no one will become like her anymore." Then angrily walked away. Under the approving gaze of the cat, Seth went to look at the nemesis. They were so cute with smooth fur. Anma appeared, surprising Seth. She angrily hit him on the head because since leaving home until now, he hadn't contacted her once. She was endlessly angry, then handed him a letter from Tatsu. He said the city was recovering from the aftermath. Tatsu said there would be a day when he would come to Actimus and become a great sorcerer like Seth. Anma also said that since he left, the villagers had cared more about her. They no longer discriminated against her. So if the kid kept dwelling in the past, he wouldn't have the chance to see tomorrow. After saying this, Anma was about to give him another punch if he still remained dejected like that. But Seth had come to his senses. He had regained his spirit, returning to being the carefree Seth as before. He still had his teammates. He ran to hug the transformed, angry Melly and Uncle Duck, because they had been teammates who had overcome many difficulties together, fighting hard together. So they had regained their spirit to continue on the path of battle ahead, with the main goal of destroying that radiant. They would definitely succeed. Seth had another nightmare. It was when he confronted General Thor. At that time, he had lost all reason and turned into a monster that could no longer be controlled. Before his eyes was a scene of ruins and devastation. Melba, Uncle Duck, and his loved ones were all in danger. Even Melly had fainted. When she drowsily woke up, she looked at him in fear and said, "Monster." Waking up from that terrifying dream made Seth horrified. He was very afraid, but perhaps this was a warning. Meanwhile, on the court side, the Magic Users Association was discussing Conrad's wrongdoings. He had, for his own benefit, expelled all immigrants and cooperated with Odometer. In the end, he was the one who was taken advantage of. Moreover, they also mocked the incident from 15 years ago that he had orchestrated to become a hero of the town. Yet 15 years later, he was embarrassingly overthrown. But ultimately, hot-tempered people couldn't work in the court. On Dragon's ship, the new soldier was complaining. Although he knew the people of the mechanical town were in difficulty, it wasn't necessary to take all their food to supply them like that. Now the entire ship was in a state of starvation and had no strength at all. The deputy, seeing this, consoled him, saying perhaps Dragon felt guilty towards the townspeople because he was Conrad's superior when this incident occurred. Perhaps Dragon was feeling very guilty. Although in the end, he had come and helped the people, no one knew what he was thinking inside. They decided to dock the ship near a small island. The deputy ordered everyone to find anything edible on this ship and bring it back. The deputy checked the dictionary and discovered that there might be mountain rabbits here. Hearing about rabbits, it seemed very delicious. But mountain rabbits weren't rabbits living on mountains, but supreme rabbits, carrying an entire mountain on their backs and running. The soldiers were chased until they were out of breath. Fortunately, thanks to Dragon, who used his bow to chase it away. So the deputy found another dish. This time, it seemed to be a delicious dish. After a long time of searching for food on the island, what they received were only small potatoes. With this amount, how could it be enough for everyone on the ship to eat sufficiently? Moreover, they were strong young men who couldn't possibly have enough strength to fight by eating just this little. Captain Dragon was also silent, after which the entire group lay down on the dining table. They were waiting for the captain to contact nearby towns to receive supplies. But no, they didn't care about the court officials, so they didn't provide any kind of food because their trust had been shaken. This made the new soldier very uncomfortable. It couldn't be that just because one person in the court was wrong, all other soldiers were judged the same. Captain Dragon gently replied, "This is normal. Isn't it the same that because of a few violent sorcerers, all sorcerers have become a thorn in everyone's eyes?" Ignoring the awkward expression on the new soldier's face, the captain left and softly said, "Tonight, everyone will have to eat fried eggs." On the deck, the captain was fishing when the new soldier came and expressed what had been weighing on his mind. He was worried about why they always did good things, but society didn't believe it. Captain Dragon gently advised, "We do good things to make our spirits comfortable, not to please others. So live without shame to yourself. Like that horned sorcerer kid, he always pursues the dream of finding and destroying Radiant to change the order of this world." After speaking, Dragon revealed an expectant smile. Seeing this, the new soldier thought of a solution. That was to go to the old town, where they had previously helped stop a nemesis during the encounter with Edmund. Although Captain Dragon didn't like it much, for the sake of the entire ship, he had to go there to ask for their help. Yet they warmly welcomed him and agreed to supply food for the entire ship. So their food problem was also solved. Meanwhile, at the coffee shop, Anma was drinking coffee with Seth's group. Uncle Duck didn't seem to like this feeling much. He didn't want to meet this wrinkly-faced old woman Anma at all. Every interaction with her made him very afraid. Although he spoke ill of her softly, Anma still heard it, so he was scolded. On the other side, Melba had brought everyone a cup of coffee, but its pale color made everyone doubtful. Melba and her papa lamented that lately, coffee beans had been scarce, so the price was very expensive. They would probably have to close the shop soon. Hearing this, Anna said it was probably because of the situation in the mechanical town, because that place was the largest production factory. They were the intermediaries processing goods. All types of coffee beans or rice had to go through there before being distributed to people in Actimus as well as other cities. Perhaps in the near future, not to mention coffee, even rice might not be guaranteed. So Melly naively replied, "It's just coffee. How could anyone not survive just because of a lack of coffee?" Hearing this, Uncle Duck seemed to wake up and shouted. Under the sewer, the octopus was lying weak. It was withering as if it had no life left. Uncle Duck hugged it, crying. He was afraid of losing this close friend. So Seth and Melly rushed to find coffee for Uncle Duck to feed the octopus. They ran back and forth, then brought a cup of pitch black coffee. Uncle Duck was endlessly touched, but when he tasted it, he realized it was ink. He scolded the two of them, so they went again to find coffee beans for him. But this time, it was actually beans. They rushed again to search. This time, they brought back a coffee plant. Uncle Duck was so happy that tares fell, but waiting for it to grow. Who knew when that would be? Finally, this time, they brought real coffee, which was coffee beans. Uncle Duck sobbed. Everyone quickly brewed coffee for the octopus to drink. After being infused with caffeine, it was bursting with life again. It gently offered coffee to Duck, also wanting him to enjoy it. But at this moment, Uncle Duck remembered why the two of them could find so much coffee. Seth naively answered that it was thanks to the cat's guidance. He said coffee was currently very expensive, but they could owe it, so Seth bought it. When he heard the debt amounted to 100 million, Uncle Duck fell to the ground. 100 million for a cup of coffee, and then he no longer wanted to live. He just wanted to meet his ancestors right now. Then his soul left his body. Seeing this, Seth and Melly ran to help him up. Now, the debt king of Actimus had set another record.